to be on the video recording, please turn your camera off, remove your name in the meeting profile, and refrain from providing verbal input during the session. Thank you for your cooperation. For written questions, please use the chat. You are welcome to submit questions at any time, but they will be collected and addressed during the dedicated Q&A sessions after all the presentations and panel discussions. Also, to ensure a smooth and respectful session for everyone, we kindly ask you to follow a few etiquette rules. Please mute your microphone, turn off your camera, of course, unless invited to speak, and use the available interaction tools where appropriate. So now let me briefly walk you through the agenda. In the first part of the program, the 6G4Society's coordinator will open the event. It will be followed by the keynote address from SNSJU program officer, which will set the strategic and policy context of the sustainability in 6G. We will then move into the dedicated session on sustainability and society, presenting the key achievements and output of the project, about lessons learned on citizens' engagement, social acceptance of technology, key value indicators, and the practical implementation of key value ontology. Following this session, we will have a Q&A segment, giving you the opportunity to directly engage with the speakers. In the second part of the afternoon, we will host first expert panel discussion focusing on the interactions between the three sustainability dimensions and discussing challenges and achievements in addressing these on the holistic way. And after a short break, we will continue with the second expert panel, where panelists will reflect on policy concerns and formulate recommendations derived from the project lessons learned and findings. Finally, we will conclude the event with a wrap-up and closing remarks, summarizing the key messages of the day. So with this overview, we are now ready to begin, and now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Dr. Monique Alisti, Director of Martel Innovate and Coordinator of 6G4Society project. Monique, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monique. As Eva said, I've been coordinating the project that is now turning to an end. But that has been navigating throughout the SNSJU ecosystem and has explored several aspects that we hope today we can discuss and present you, and also leave as posterity, as inheritance to the whole SNSJU community and beyond, in order to ensure that we build a 6G that is not only competing and leading at technology level, but it helps to support our society, our economy, and preserve and regenerate our planet. The idea is to make sure that we understand what are the crucial aspects for the foundation of a 6G technology that by design embeds sustainability. And when we say sustainability, we imply social, environmental, and economical aspects into its design and development, and that goes beyond the idea of creating a more energy efficient next generation networks, but that builds up really the skeleton of a digital society that will be more and more depending on networks, and that clearly must embed and must be built thanks to a multidisciplinary kind of approach. In this project, we have already within the consortium, we have 6 different partners. We have different profiles. We have more technology experts, soil scientists, policy citizen scientists, and we have been working with different stakeholders. Only by having a multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder approach, we believe we can achieve a 6G that by design is sustainable. And we need to provide tools for engineers, for the people, for the organization that are developing 6G. So that's why it has been very important to work with the whole community. We've been participating in several 6G IA and SNSJU working group and task forces. Together with some projects, we had the chance to go a little bit deeper into some specific aspects. The project has created a number of tools that we are leaving to the posterity that we are confident will help guiding efforts for next projects, but also for the ongoing ones. And today we want to give you a sense, and we want to discuss with you, also get your feedback and discuss with experts from different areas what are also our main learnings, but also what are the opportunities and forward-looking in these indications also for policy related matters. Today, you will hear about the social acceptance of technology framework. You will hear about key value indicators. You will hear about the key value ontology. And overall, you will also get a flavor of the feedback that a EU-wide citizen survey that we have kept open for more than a year has raised up. These are pieces of a puzzle. We hope that this puzzle and the pieces that we're putting together will create a concrete map. It's not only a vision, we really want to give a map with specific steps and specific tools. We believe it's important that beyond the duration of our projects, there is concrete use of such tools. And we will facilitate this transition in the best way we can, also thanks to the many other projects and experts we have engaged at the SNSJU office level, but also at the SNSJU community level and within the 6GIA. So without any further ado, I give back the floor to Eva, and I thank you all for being here with us.
Thank you, Monique, for the introduction and for setting the context for today's event. We now continue with our keynote address. Our keynote speaker today is Chiara Mazzone, Program Officer of SNSJU, who will speak about broader strategic and policy context. Chiara, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see my slides coming up and that I can share in full screen mode. Let me know when it's done.
We see the slides. We don't see them in a full screen mode. Ecco. Now, yes. Perfect. Thank you, Chiara.
So, thank you very much and welcome to this 6G4Society final event. I'm really glad to be here, and I've been given the unambitious task of discussing SNSJU's strategic positioning and sustainability leadership, not just within the European context, but also with the global market landscape. So with this in mind, I think I can move to my first slide. So let me start by the current context. So industrial competitiveness and economic security are now central to both the European Union and in the global economic landscape. The European Union has been strengthening its industrial base while developing new economic models which try to combine competitiveness with sustainability and long-term resilience. I've just mentioned a few of the examples, such as the Draghi report, which has been published in 2024, and we have a 1 year later report, and some of the strategic initiatives, just the top one, the competitiveness compass from the Commission. Now, I think the novelty of today, it's actually that 6G4Society, which is our SNSJU CSA, Coordination and Support Action, would aim to complete this view with a broader understanding of societal and sustainability issues, and also the needs for future smart network and services. So providing these insights from this social desirability perspective and how this desirability can become a driver within the technological process to define, design, and develop smart network and services of the future and for the future. What I wanted to underline is that this work has been done through the lenses of a diversified set of social, human scientists, technology experts, and communicators, and with the engagements of the citizens, which I think is crucial, divided by gender, age, but which I think it's crucial to reach out also to people and to people feeling and needs. Now, my slides, these slides would like to leave you with a central question of how 6G development can be guided to ensure meaningful social and environmental contributions. And I hope we will have an exhaustive answer today, listening to the different project results coming from 6G4Society. Now, in case you don't know Smart Networks and Services Joint Undertaking, we are the European body entrusted to promote 5G deployment, but also to look into next generation connectivity technologies, including all the future capabilities of future networks and services that can be developed on top of these networks, which we call actually the research and the path towards 6G. So we select and fund a portfolio of nearly 100 research and innovation projects, of which the 6G4Society CSA is one of those. Now, let me come to the topic of today, which is actually sustainability. And speaking about challenges and opportunity, that's how sustainability came as a central piece of the puzzle. I've heard Monique using this expression. I would like to use it too. The urgency of today climate change, the steady rise in resource consumptions from global electricity consumption due also to the hyper use of artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence, to materials, to rare earth consumption. All of these put sustainability at the heart of many political agendas, some more than others, but definitely at the heart of the SNSJU roadmap. Although the path actually is unfolding as we speak, because we have been moving from an initial approach where we were focusing on funding, for instance, green radio technologies and green system architectures, to expand visibility to something which was broader, different dimensions, with subsequent work program of the SNSJU, which were reflecting, I would say, the intrinsic ambition that we had on sustainability. Let me just name a few. We have our European flagship, we just concluded EXA-X2. We have 6G4Society, which really tried to bridge this dimension of sustainability, both environmental and social, to the societal aspect that the project has observed throughout the 2 years. And we have a fully dedicated lighthouse, which is Sustain 6G, which is also part of the conversation, where definitely they are exploring how sustainable 6G can come together with 6G4Sustainability. So on top of having this sustainable, environmental, societal, economic dimension, I've added a couple of other headers and footers, which are the European values and which is technological sovereignty. And let me spend a word on this. So technological sovereignty is not my role to comment on the policy agenda, but I think we all live in a world where technology sovereignty is having a more profound meaning for the people, for industry, for the continents we live in. And that's why it links to what I call the European values. Let me spend a few words on KVIs. So KVIs, which are based on key values and on how measure those key values, both quantitative and qualitative, so key value indicators, are for me, have emerged as a truly European innovation, offering for a way to integrate values into innovation and technological developments. The Work Program 2025, which we are currently selecting projects for, put a great emphasis on operationalizing key value indicators. And why? That's why I go back to our leadership and potentially our influence over the other world's region. It's also because we expect that those inputs, for instance, towards contribution to standards, might be one of the ways where Europe have a say and exerts a kind of influence over other regions of the world. But equally, I take this as an opportunity for our industry and for our researchers to design technology that fits people's needs. Now, we expect, of course, let me just come back because I wanted to say one more thing. So I think the question here for me, the main question that we will try to address and hopefully to answer today is overall, how can we support a transition towards sustainability, which is an integral value and a strategic driver of our research and innovation, instead of adopting, let me call it a trade-off logic, where we have kind of winners and where we have kind of losers. So how can we turn this into be a win-win solution? Now we are walking the talk because this is a map of our projects. This comes from call 1, 2, and 3 and does not consider, of course, the proposals that are still under evaluation, of projects that are working directly, and some of the speakers that are here know more than me on the different technologies that have been developed, but that are working on energy efficient technologies, which was the first step, but we also integrated other dimensions of sustainability. Such as societal, social inclusion, privacy, other kind of concerns that also emerged from citizens panels, but equally that are working on broader aspects of sustainability, which are not just related to energy efficiency, but which are relating also to energy consumption reduction and to carbon emission reduction. Also, what I can say in full trust is that great work has been done. Notably, let me pay credit to the technology board of SNSJU Sustainability Task Force, which carried out an extensive work with 27 projects, devising where R&I technology developments focused. So we have said prior and at the very beginning on energy efficient technologies, with many projects actively working on different components and aspects of the network core and elements and pulling this together. But also identifying where gaps were. So, for instance, considering other dimensions of environmental sustainability, such as renewable energy sources use, or sustainable material use, or IoT devices, or circularity approaches, and equally trying to address on an equal foot all the three dimensions of sustainability. That's why I've put here an excerpt from their white paper, which I really recommend to go through and to read if you haven't done so, which actually showed that, for instance, digital inclusion and social inclusions were topics that were dealt by our projects. We can discuss if they were rightly dealt or not, or sufficiently, but there were some kind of approaches also to other forms of sustainability. So I would like to underline also this part that comes from the work of our projects. Now, let me move to some achievements, because I think we have some. Less than 2 weeks ago, we unveiled the 188 SNSJU funded projects key achievements, but we also revealed the top 10. And I think the important message here from the community and for the community is that sustainability is one of the categories that was assessed. We had a winner in this category, which was XAX2, our flagship initiative, notably on the sustainable 6G use cases families that have also been contributed to the standards, and also on 6G connectivity for zero and energy devices. Also from the SNSJU program perspective, we are spotlighting successes, impacts, and stories that technologies researched and developed in our projects bring to society. I've just put the latest one that we have on our LinkedIn newsletter, where we a bit dissect what's the brains, which are the technological components behind green networks. And I think that's also support into how we communicate to a broader public about the importance of sustainability in our work program. Now, let me jump to SNSJU results. So, we focus on measuring and maximizing impact. That's why our project portfolio is fully aligned with our key performance indicators. We have KPIs. We don't have KPIs for ourselves, but that's an open point for discussion if you want. And we track progress in energy efficiency, for instance, ubiquitous coverage, security and resilience, industry uptake, contribution to standards, and you see some here. With regards to sustainability, we had in 2024 energy efficient networks, of which 17 projects were at that time actively working on. And we have nearly half of our projects that do address sustainability concerns from low energy to a bit broader categories, as we said before. I've outlined some of the outputs, like the white paper, the number of projects working on these aspects, but also we have an output indicator, which is to reach 50% increase energy efficiency in telecommunication networks, which is also something that we are taking care of. Now, this is program insights, but I also wanted to share that most of the project's participants also consider and perceive sustainability both as a challenge as an opportunity. This is a questionnaire that has been put through the different projects, and actually you can see that sustainable 6G, 6G for sustainability, new business models and market segments are something that are also priority for the company and the SMEs and the researchers that we touch with our program. This is not only coming from our projects, but this is also coming from statistics from 3GPP. This is coming from the Seoul meeting, where we had seen that sustainable and green network solutions were one of the highest contribution into standards. So these slides mirror actually up to our priority at program and project levels, together with the impacts we can make in standards. And I think it's a good indicator that we're not just researching and we're not just driving ahead our values, but this is reflecting also over global influence from the European players. Now, let me conclude with a last slide. You might have seen this already in some presentations, but what I really wanted to focus on today is that we are speaking about research and innovation. And I think there are different considerations on how responsible this research and innovation is, how inclusive this research and innovation is. But I would also like to extend this view throughout the technological development and, of course, the contribution to European competitiveness into our end goal, which is ultimately, I think, to all of us, social, societal, economic progress. Now, maybe one idea, one suggestion for further discussion is let's think how we can shift from something which is technology, more infrastructure focused in terms also of metrics, to something which is more outcome focused, which is a monitoring maybe of what the projects do and what is their impact on society. So how can we shift this view? How can we get there? Which kind of tools, instruments do we need to make this happen? Because that would be also very, very impactful for citizens, where he has got many questions about the future networks, the future of connectivity, which can provide maybe a decent answer, which is not just technological deployment or development. Now, let me conclude on a quote that I've taken from our executive director, Esbeth Fittori, which says that actually leadership in 6G is more than a technological achievement. It's a commitment to digital sovereignty, as we have mentioned before, economic growth, sustainability, and societal advancement. And let me leave you with a reflection, which I think also personally that we need to create a desirable vision of what the future technologies are and what they can deliver to align most possibly with the green transition and the societal progress, possibly involving inclusive and responsible ethical technology developments. Now, with this, let me hope that we will have all this answer and suggestion from our event today, and I wish you good luck and all the best, and I'll stay connected to listening to all your achievements. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chiara, for this insightful keynote about how the sustainability considerations are indeed being embedded to the programmatic level of SNSJU. We now move to the first thematic session entitled Sustainability and Society, presenting the work of 6G4Society. So our first speaker is Flavia Maragno from Digital for Planet. Flavia will present the lessons learned from citizens' insights on 6G technology. Flavia, please go ahead and share the screen. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, hello everyone. So in the next few minutes, I will share some insights from the work that we have conducted in 6G4Society over the last 2 years related to public engagement, citizen engagement. My presentation at the beginning, I will dive a little bit into the role of the public voice and why it is important that we listen to it. Then I will share some insights from our engagement activities, both quantitative and qualitative, as well as some learnings for that, with a special focus on listening to doubt. and then some final insights for stakeholders that we can use and learnings for public communication and engagement. So at first, we want to look at why should we listen to the public. Of course, a lot of our activities have been involved in listening to citizens and having a dialogue and looking together at what can be done. But perhaps there is a question of why is this even something that we should look into? Why is it important? And there are a number of reasons of why it's important that we listen to the public when it comes to technologies like 6G. Number one is that public values can help us identify blind spots in design that people that are experts, whether it is the technology providers, the policymakers, the people that deal with the technology every day, may not identify because they are so inside of the technology. Also, early engagement and public engagement helps build trust, which is something that cannot be retrofitted later in the process. And it also supports acceptance because people feel more likely to accept the technology when they feel connected to it and when they feel that they're not just passive receivers of the technology, but they feel they've been involved from the beginning. And finally, it helps us anticipate potential ethical and social risks. So during our work, we really wanted to see public input not as a checkbox, but rather as a compass, something that would guide all of our activities, and to switch and shift our vision from can we build this technology to should we build this technology and who are we building this technology for. So we started our work with looking at what is the current narrative surrounded 5G, the people, the citizens, what have they been fed when it comes to 5G technology, and therefore what is the current status that we have to build upon. And we see that a lot of the discourse around 5G has focused on language and words related to transforming and changing the world and revolutionary. So really big promises, a lot of revolutionary of your daily life, of technology, of work. So their expectations have been really, really high. And this is the basis that it was important for us to know that we were working on. This is a brief reflection on our methods of technologies, of engagement with the technology. We have been using a number of different tools. One of them has been workshops. We have run a number of different engagement activities in different countries with different target audiences, younger, older, a middle, a mix, a little bit of everything. And it was really important for our approach to really be open, non-technical, inclusive, to be judgment-free and really create this listening-based dialogue, not see these activities as a way to extract opinions and information, but really a channel to create dialogue and to invite participation. Another tool has been the information package for non-experts. This has been a set of different information tools that we use to communicate with the public and to give very clear, relatable information when it comes to 6G. This information lies on our website in a section called What is 6G? So really, if someone really just has a question, what is 6G? We were able to answer in a few different languages, as you can see, about basic topics related to 6G, what it means for daily life. And we have also developed an animated video called What is 6G that goes through the history of the technology, what it means, and really addressing both positive and negative potential concerns, potential positive outcomes, a little bit of everything in a clear and as unbiased as possible way. And finally, another tool has been our citizen survey. We have collected over 1,800 responses. The survey was developed in 9 languages. And as you can see here, we were able to collect really across generational distribution of the ages. We managed to collect really answers from all the different age groups in combination also with the interactions that we have with the different public engagement and activities and workshops. It is also important to highlight some of the potential limitations of this data because this tells us something about the data when we look into. For example, one limitation has been that we can see that we have a higher representation of the respondents coming from residents of urban areas. This is an important data because, of course, people who reside in urban areas will have a different relationship with the technology, with innovation, with the use of everyday life with technology, compared to someone who lives, for example, in a small town or in a rural area. And this is important to know when we look at the data because the interpretation will vary. One important point that emerged from the data is the sources of information that people use to learn about topics related to 6G, technology, connectivity networks. We see the news media is the most trusted source of information regarding technology and connectivity. And we also see really high social media and peer communication. So people learn about this technology from the media that is closer to them, and maybe surprising a little bit less when it comes to institutional sources of information like university or technical information. This tells us that technical messages alone are not enough. We need to make sure that when we talk about these topics, we explain it in clear, relatable terms. We have to show the real life benefits, and we have to make sure to use the right channels, even if they may not be the obvious choices. We have to make sure that we reach the audience in all the different ways that they actually will use and trust the information that they receive. When it comes to the perceived concerns and opportunities, we see privacy, ethics, and governance scoring really high. And it's also important to note that cybersecurity also has scored really high, and often privacy and cybersecurity go hand in hand because people see this as really complementary issues. And this issue is also one of the ones that is really high across all generations. So it's not just one age group that sees this as really important, but it's really across the whole population. And there is a strong focus on wanting to see governance activity. So how do we utilize these technologies to make sure that my privacy concerns are addressed? So these are not opinions that come from people who feel anti-technology or don't want to see the development of 6G. It's really a question of how do we use the technology. So you can see here on the right, we put also some more qualitative results, so some quotes that have emerged. These are just some that for the sake of the presentation I've included, but there are many, many more that really tells us, for example, they are tools. What is important is how we use them. This is, of course, a very simple way that people express that they need governance and ethics approach when it comes to managing the technology. Another important opportunity that emerges here on environmental sustainability. So also across the different generations, we see, as you can see here on the graphs, climate change and respect for the ecosystem. Respect for the ecosystem can mean many different things, can mean the work on biodiversity or long-term ecological health, recycling even. So it is a little bit of a wider term, but it includes different topics. But what is clear is that there is high level of environmental awareness, and that technology plays a role in how we do respect or not respect or exceed the planetary limit. Another important element that has arisen throughout our activities is the question of why. So perhaps for us working on the technology every day, it is not a question to ask whether we move from 4G to 5G or 6G, but it has come over and over across different generations, different channels, different opportunities, different tools. The question of why, is it even something that has to happen, or do we want to happen that we have 6G? This is something really important for us to address and to understand, because it tells us that perhaps in our communication to why 6G has to happen, maybe we're not being clear enough or forward enough, but also that this goes back to my first point of, it's not how can we build the technology, but should we build the technology? So it's this question that has to happen at the very beginning of the design process. So here you can see some of the many, many quotes related to this topic. So for example, I will read a couple, but I see material and energy overconsumption for the sake of watching high definition videos anywhere. I don't see it as a positive development for our society. Or it feels like these generations are not driven by societal demands. Technology doesn't solve the problems I have with society today, especially 6G. Again, these are not comments for people who hate technology. These are normal issues and concerns that everyday people have, and it's up to us to answer these in a transparent and non-judgmental way. Finally, there have been many, many other insights, but again, for the sake of this presentation, we have just highlighted a few, but based on these learnings, we have put together just a couple of insights that stakeholders, specifically policymakers and technology providers, can utilize as learnings when it comes to working with the population on related to 6G. Some of these are common on the two stakeholders, so early engagement and early work with the population and listening. It's really important, especially when it comes to supporting trust and acceptance. We have a few points related to ensuring that there is by design fairness and inclusion. For technology providers, really important to communicate in accessible, non-technical and relatable terms, using mainstream media and social spaces. So you can find all of these learnings also in our final deliverables in a longer format, as well as all of the insights coming from our public engagement activities. Finally, why is it important that we look at this information? Because if we wonder what happens if society and industry are out of sync. So we have actually already seen what happens if society and industry and technology are out of sync. When we have seen certain technologies like facial recognition or even 5G, when there was a disconnect between the different elements of society, we have seen fear, skepticisms, and resistance. So we already have examples of what happens if we don't take all of these elements into consideration. When we see that these systems were perceived as being developed without the public in mind and rather just given as passive users. And we see what happens if we ignore values like equity, sustainability, and inclusion. This will lead to disengagement, mistrust, and slow adoption. Finally, my last slide is some learnings and lessons learned for future 6G communication, whether it is for future projects, for anything related to future communication related to 6G. So we have seen that applying a public engagement strategy that is unbiased and taking into consideration all aspects of the communication when it comes to a new potential technology can be really challenging and requires a lot of preparation. And it's important that every approach and every strategy is really targeted to different audiences, because different groups of the population communicates in a different way. They respond to different languages, different approach, different styles of dialogue, and of course utilize different channels. So this is something that needs to be set really at the beginning of any desire to communicate about 6G. And then it's also really important to focus on use cases and not abstract concepts, but really relatable everyday use cases that people can feel that really apply to their life. Something more technical, but is really about the language use. So we have found that often people don't know what 6G is. So saying terms like the next generation of 5G, future technology, future communication technology. This is just making sure that the language is adapted to who you're talking to, and not just using the language that you've been using every day and hoping that your interlocutor will understand. So in general, as a final message, what I'm sure you have seen is that early engagement has been key, and that when people feel heard and involved, they're more likely to support the technology that we want to communicate to, and that this has been really a big learning for our work, and that we hope that will be carried on from for future work and projects. So this is it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Flavia, for indeed this important contribution highlighting the voice of citizens in shaping future connectivity. Just a reminder for everyone that we will collect the questions in the chat and answer them all together at the corresponding Q&A session after all the presentations. Thank you. We now turn to Lucas Carville from Cyber Social Lab. Lucas will present the lessons learned from 6G4Society on the social acceptance of technology. Lucas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eva. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll share with what we've learned about social acceptance of technology and why this matters for 6G. Before I begin, let me flag a distinction that shapes everything I'll present. When I say social acceptance, I mean something specific, different from what the technology adoption literature typically means. While user acceptance asks, will individuals adopt this technology? Social acceptance asks, will society grant this technology legitimacy? These are different questions. The distinction is at the heart. Oh, you don't see my representation?
No, Lucas, see.
We just see a green screen. Well, gray screen. Now, yes.
No,
yes. No, it's fine.
Now, yes. Lucas, it's okay now.
Can you see it?
Yes.
So, as I was saying, these are different questions, right? So, when we ask, will individuals adopt this technology, it's not the same as will society grant this technology legitimacy. And this is at the heart of what 6G needs and what current approaches miss. So, this isn't a triumphant presentation claiming we've solved acceptance. It's a progress report, what we found, what we're proposing, what still needs doing. So, why are we here? Why acceptance is on the 6G agenda? What do we know about acceptance and what tools exist? What we found, the 6G ecosystem evidence and the SAP framework and the road ahead is what you should expect from this presentation. So 6G4Society challenge. So there's this idea, there's a core tension between the 6G development, that it must be balance two things that don't naturally align. One is securing technology performance, the KPIs, the specifications, while ensuring that social and sustainability values are properly embedded. This is the explicit SNSJU mandate, as you guys heard before. European 6G has committed to going beyond technical performance. But here's what decades of research tells us. Technologies are not merely adopted, they are negotiated, contested, and legitimized through complex social processes. The real question is not whether society will accept 6G. It's on what terms, through which processes, with whose values encoded. And that's our mission, uncover challenges and understand what matters and social implications and help ensure 6G evolves as sustainable, legitimate, and trusted. So we look back, like Flavia mentioned in her work, we look back at 5G because 6G does not exist yet. So we took 5G as a cautionary tale. So why does this matter now? Because we've seen what happens, and when social acceptance is neglected, we found that it must be troubling for the innovation process. So over 288 attacks across 13 countries in Europe, protests, municipal bans across Europe, Italy, France, Switzerland, the UK, the Netherlands. And the deeper story here is not just that communication failures, there were also governance failures because many citizens complained that they were not heard. Communities felt excluded from decisions affecting them. They felt their health concerns were dismissed rather than engaged. Privacy anxieties connected to broader distrust, and underlining it all, the business model question: who benefits, who decides? This was something that came across often from our research. The people protesting weren't refusing to use 5G apps. It's not a matter of adoption. Many use mobile data daily. They were contesting the legitimacy of infrastructure deployed without consultation. The key lesson here, I think, is that technical excellence does not guarantee social legitimacy. And the SNSJU mandate asks us to think about acceptance. So what's our role here? As a coordination and support action, we bridge technical research and innovation in social dimensions. Our objective is, as was said previously, was to develop an acceptance model for the 6G ecosystem. And the key refrain here, and it's important to bear in mind, is that we were not asked to convince the public. We were asked to understand the conditions of legitimacy and promote them through governance, values, and trust. That's a fundamentally different starting point. So what was the acceptance landscape? The different fields, the different questions. When we mapped the landscape, we found acceptance means different things depending on who's asking. From the point of view of innovation studies, where Tom and you taught are more frequent, the question is, like I said before, will users adopt it? And the object is individual adoption. While when we move through in energy and infrastructure studies, the question shifts, will community tolerate it? The object is community dynamics. And we'll see that this also applies to 5G and might also apply to 6G. In the ethics of technology, the question becomes normative. Should it be deployed at all? We can think of social media, how a acceptance is there, but there are so many acceptability questions regarding privacy, the harm done to teenagers, things that also Flavia alluded before. So this is where we find a distinction between acceptance, what people do accept, and acceptability, what should be acceptable. And last but not least, another part of the puzzle to think about acceptance is found in science and technology studies, where controversies revolving around technological development becomes a method, not a noise, something to be ignored. Here we do think that controversies reveal how knowledge is produced and how decisions are made in a very fruitful way, also showing how some certain stakeholders might feel ignored and might bear the burdens of the technological innovation cycle. So each tradition asks different questions. None alone captures what 6G as a genuinely novel infrastructure requires. So what common models do well and what they miss? So if we think about the term in UTAUT, they capture, like I said, individual adoption, and that's valuable, but they miss institutions, they miss governance, something that Chiara alluded to, they miss contested values, they miss power dynamics. They were designed for workplace IT, system individuals choose to use or not. Or think about the public acceptance model that captures aggregated sentiment, public attitudes, but opinion is not the same as legitimacy, and these models often treat resistance as noise, something to be overcome through better communication. But here's the core issue. You can opt out of an app, but you cannot opt out of infrastructure. When a 5G antenna goes up, you're affected whether you're a user or not. Infrastructure requires collective acceptance, and that's a governance challenge, not a user experience question. And this is another reason for thinking about how social acceptance could do more for us than thinking only exclusively in terms of time. So here I would like also to stress the positive side of engaging with controversies and not dismissing people as irrational or ignorant, and think about what resistance can reveal to us. This brings me to one of our key analytical insights, that controversies are as diagnostic resources. Rather than treating resistance as noise, as I said previously, or communication failure or public ignorance, we treat controversies as breaching moments that reveal hidden assumptions. What do they reveal? Three things, just to make an example. Stakeholders, who wasn't consulted? Which publics emerged because they weren't at the table? Which values compete? What trade-offs are being made without explicit deliberation, something that also Chiara mentioned when she mentioned trade-offs, or even governance gaps? Where did institutions fail? What accountability was missing? Like I said, in many cities in Europe, people contested the fact that they were not heard before citing decisions. So the key message here is resistance is a signal, not noise. The danger is treating it as a problem to manage rather than a gap to address. And the first finding, and I'm not going to be exhaustive because of time, and we're going to publish our deliverables. So I'll stick to at least two main findings here. The first one, based on our interactions through surveys, interviews, and participation in working groups, was that there's a conceptual fragmentation, right? Now, let me share what we found when we engaged directly with them. We surveyed projects across 2 rounds, 2024 and 2025, reaching approximately 80%. And when we asked, what does social acceptance mean to you, we received 44 responses. And definitions range for user adoption, public opinion, stakeholder engagement, societal impact. And the problem here is you can't coordinate what you haven't defined. And the second the second finding from this interactions were the awareness action gap, which meant that projects recognize acceptance as relevant, but most of them didn't have a framework to tackle the problem. That is, they were missing that organized way of dealing with acceptance. And we are here thinking, if there's a method gap, how to actually assess and integrate social dimensions. And a risk, acceptance becomes a checkbox in proposals, not practice in projects. That is, it's something you do at the end, at the level of communication, and not upstream when you're thinking about technological development. And here it's interesting to say that we also found that when we were conducting interviews, people were saying, we don't have a definition, no common framework. And also they highlighted structural barriers, that it TRL timing and budget structures that block early engagement. By the time engagement becomes appropriate, projects are ending, one person told me. That is, when they think they should be interacting with people, there's no more resources or time available to do it. And the ecosystem has expertise in technical performance, but it lacks methods for governance focus, legitimacy-oriented work, which is also something that tells us a little bit about the multidisciplinarity. There aren't many social sciences involved in these projects. We're like a standalone project, basically, this CSA we're talking now. And we also asked projects what acceptance challenges they foresee for 6G. And here if we found something similar to what Flavia mentioned before. That is, they mentioned that where concerns would be around security and privacy concerns, often related to AI integration. Some projects cited health concerns, others cited cost concerns, remembering that they think if 5G failed to deliver, the monetization aspect of it. 4 projects mentioned digital literacy, others cited a digital divide. And tellingly, some projects explicitly stated, not sure society understands why they need 6G. Something that comes often when people are saying, but don't we have enough with 5G? But these are new concerns. They echo 5G. The question is whether we will address them differently this time. And I hope with the social acceptance framework, we could do that. So what these gaps means for 6G? What happens if we don't address these gaps? One is fragmentation, means projects talk past each other. Lessons don't transfer, no common understanding, no shared indicators. Me, Katrina, and others who's been working with that, we know that pretty well, and can exchange that experience with you all. The gap means good intentions without follow through. People understand that these things are important. The acceptance are present in proposals, but not in practice. And the result is that we might risk of seeing the 5G patterns repeat. In legitimacy crisis at deployment, people contesting the rollout, asking to have the rollouts delayed, as was the case in France and Italy. And what I think is needed is obviously is this shared framework, practical tools and governance integration, something that my colleagues will address later on this presentation. So what are the structures of our social acceptance of framework here? We're talking about thinking not only about the user individual level, which is usually covered by human-computer interaction research that deals with user adoption, experiential responses, but we're considering also social dimension, where controversies with civil society actors, environmental concerns that have to do with intergenerational justice have something to say. So here we're talking about things that are not immediately apparent to this way of thinking that has been crystallized when we're doing technology acceptance research. That is, people might think that they don't want to bear the environmental costs, and they might protest that, or even the systemic level, understanding the geopolitics, the spectrum, standards, and regulations also as obstacles for acceptance, and having a different understanding of the actors involved. So we work with these 4 operational layers, which we call the bubbles here in Cyber Social Lab, which are the user experience. There's this individual level, the values, which societal values are embedded, contested, or at risk in this particular innovation. How technology transforms institutions, practices, and norms, how it changes the way we learn about things. And trust, institutional and interpersonal dynamics. The key idea here is integration. SAT holds together acceptance, the empirical reality of what people accept, and this was done by looking back to 5G, and also acceptability, the normative questions of what should be acceptable, by posing what should we think about in terms of the risks and challenges ahead. So how do we think that SAT could help projects? They could help, where does this help? Early research and development, anticipating not just who are our users, but who else would be affected. Which publics might emerge based on the impacts of these technologies, on the social disruptive potential of this technology? What value tensions are we creating? In design, we could think of embedding by design. Participatory reflection with diverse perspective, not just user testing. And at the level of deployment, we could engage, map community concerns, establish governance with genuine accountability. This is where social acceptance is won or lost. In operation, monitor. In the case of the operation dimension, we could monitor, track trust, adapt to emerging concerns, thinking that acceptance is not one time only, it's an ongoing relation. And that the framework here is assumed to be modular, scalable, adaptable, and should be contextualized to the specific innovations rather than replacing existing approaches. So the honest reflections here is a stand for what we learned here from these interactions with the community. That acceptance was often misread. We've seen that we don't have an agreement yet. Projects assume we mean user experience or communication strategies. We had to clarify. We were asking about legitimacy, governance, and values, and also that the theoretical frameworks didn't always land. It has to do with the expertise of those involved. Technical teams sometimes struggled with that, the concepts, the way that the questions were framed. We learned to lead with that, with trying to change the way we were asking the questions with practical questions. Engagement was harder than expected. Project fatigue is real. So many meetings and so little time. And these aren't failures by any means. They're normal challenges that when bridging SSH, social science and humanities, and technical communities. But they shape what we could deliver and point to what we still need doing. So what I think is next is from framework to practice, is to continue distinguishing social from user acceptance in the ecosystem's thinking. I think this is a very important point to distinguish between social acceptance and user acceptance. To operationalize, develop this practical method for engagement of governance, value, deliberation, and connect. In this case, we're working with Sustain 6G, the KVI development, and responsible innovation efforts by mapping them. In terms of governing, we're thinking about advocate for institutional change, funding that supports this work, evaluation criteria that distinguish social from user acceptance, some dedicated research to the question of acceptance, not only to be a part of projects that have other goals. Validate this with pilots with real projects, test whether the framework helps anticipate challenges, have an experience based on a project dedicated to it would help. And this isn't work, of course, we can do alone. We need partners for piloting, governance, integration, and critique. And the SAT framework, we believe, is a starting point. Collaborative validation makes it work in practice, but I hope we can come up to an agreement that these questions matter and that the kind of research done here, it's important to achieve the goals we said we were supposed to fulfill. This is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucas, for this thought-provoking presentation and key insights from our survey results. We are running late, unfortunately, with the program, so due to the time constraints, we ask the speakers to reply the questions coming in through the chat in a written format. So please feel free to drop other questions if you may have, and we can move now to the next speaker, to Katrina Pettersson from Public Safety Communication Europe. And Katrina will introduce how key value indicators can be used to guide value-driven innovation and serve as a framework for SNSG projects. Katrina, please go ahead.
Thank you, Eva. Can you guys all see my screen and hear me? So great. So I'm Katrina Peterson with Public Safety Communication Europe, and I'm here to discuss the key findings from the project regarding KVIs and how they can support us potentially in assessing sustainability for 6G. And I'm going to try to go fast, Eva, see what I can do for us. So to begin, we must really clarify what we mean by a key value indicator or a KVI. So they are a metric, so a quantitative metric or a qualitative assessment that can be used to observe the extent to which innovation aligns with and furthers fundamental societal values. So our goal is to move beyond just assessing mere project outputs, which is, which is what the project itself produces, to trying to understand what is changing for society. So an outcome is a change in experience for stakeholders. So it's sort of the difference of thinking about a successful demonstration of a technology prototype that could be used in remote communities, to thinking about how do you know that that is actually going to allow you to have previously unconnected citizens gain access, and looking for the proxies that help you track that. Now, obviously, you can't track, for example, do you now have a 10,000 new previously unconnected citizens in a project because the technology isn't deployed. So it must be measured by proxies. Now, these could track back to the KPIs, but they can also track to other things like the contextual details or processes that support the technology in being successful. So ultimately, KPIs steer us towards the long-term impact, like reversing rural depopulation or bridging the digital divide. So this is just to clarify this purpose. I often use this metaphor, which I quite like, and is utterly cheesy, but it might wake you guys up a little bit at this point in the process, which is if a KPI specifies how efficiently a car is built, measuring its horsepower and fuel economy, then a KVI is evidence showing that the car achieves its societal purpose, such as safely transporting people, reducing city smog, and increasing accessible transit for elderly citizens. So the KVI ensures that even if the engine's performing perfectly, the vehicle is taking society down the right road. That's the end of my cheesiness at this moment. So to explore what this means in practice and how to tie KVIs to sustainability, we've run a series of activities over the last 2 years. We've done workshops with projects, expert consultations, a survey of all the projects, individual and small group project interactions, workshops with one of the vertical set of stakeholders, and folding those results in with the literature, putting the suggestions on paper, and exploring those implications with some of the projects. So the SNS community, as Chiara already said in her introduction for us, shares a very high ambition for KVIs, but there's a gap between this vision and what's practically feasible currently within the projects. So within our survey, there's top challenges from the KVIs that we're seeing, and they center heavily on measurement, validation, and aligning long-term value with short-term project realities. So the top struggles reported including defining indicators that can be measured within the project's lifetime, defining quantitative measures, validating KVIs, and this doesn't mean measuring KVIs, this is a social science word of knowing that the indicator is right for the value, that actually does point in the direction you think it is, as well as low TRL's relationship to KVIs. So to understand why these challenges are here and what contextually is driving them, our qualitative workshop data offers some insights. So first, the hopes for KVIs are really clear. We want to foster responsible, sustainable, human-centric innovation, align technology with societal needs and European priorities, and increase public acceptance of 6G. However, KVIs are often perceived as being a little bit too abstract or ambitious to really concretely define, especially for lower TRL projects or projects that don't have use cases to concretely embed into. There's a lack of in-house expertise, this is what Lucas was already speaking about, to define meaningful indicators. And there's actually a fundamental concern that sustainability goals will be sacrificed for market viability and cost, risking that KVIs become nothing more than greenwashing or box-ticking exercise. And I think the extent of those fears are actually the counterbalance to the hopes that underline the KVIs and need to be taken quite seriously. A critical lesson is that achieving societal goals is not simply an optimization problem. Projects must constantly balance competing priorities. Our survey data revealed a complex network of trade-offs. Societal values were frequently weighed against technological necessities, such as performance or even cost. Actually, cost considerations were basically nearly traded off against nearly every other value. And the tensions demonstrate that without a strategic framework that guides these decision-making processes, that the technical and financial considerations, the current model will consistently override broader societal objectives. So projects need something not from the engineering perspective, but from the governance perspective that can support them in understanding when societal values overrides performance. So when should we pay to focus on inclusivity at the sacrifice of performance or cost, for example, or how do we bring these into balance with each other? So based on these challenges, we've identified several strategic lessons, and I'll go over each of them in more detail as I talk, but really quickly, we have the idea that we need to potentially stop treating KPIs like KPIs, seeking quantifiable targets and thresholds. We need an approach that addresses the broader, multifaceted, and often qualitative nature of societal value. If you think about it, if you're trying to define inclusivity, what is the threshold for inclusivity? Is there a percentage, 80%, 99%, 100%? When have you reached that? It's not possible to define, and it'll change depending on the context. So targets and thresholds aren't necessarily the right approach to these types of indicators, and there are other types of indicators to draw from. Second, we must bridge the technical and the social, recognizing that their societal impacts requires deep engagement with end users, community groups, policymakers, and different types of scientists. I'm the third person now to reiterate this point, rather than limiting the conversation to technical partners. Third, a KPI's purpose, any indicator's purpose, in fact, is to inform a specific decision for a specific stakeholder towards a desired outcome. If you can't act on it, it's not a good KPI. So what we need to do is agree upon what decisions should be made by who and when with KPIs. And currently there's a spread of different varieties to the answer to that question across the community. And finally, we need to harmonize the value landscape. So while the general high-level terms are actually agreed upon overall, what they mean in terms of the objectives and the reference points are very diverse. And there needs to be a structure to support the cross-project learning that can allow us to identify what this is. And this should be not just common internally amongst the project partners, but also potentially common externally. So, going through each lesson in a little bit more detail. So to elaborate on the just little bit of difference of why KPIs might need to be addressed a little bit differently than KPIs, it's useful to understand the difference between them. KPIs define what values matter. KPIs quantify a technology's performance ability to enable it. And Lucas already mentioned user experience. User experience describes an individual's experience of that enabler. This means that KPIs could be tracked onto KPIs and user experience, but that they can and should look outside the technology to the context and the details that enable the technology to perform as desired in society. Can essential services feasibly deploy the technology to provide access to their community members? This is something that could be determined within a project lifespan, but looks outside of the technology. Are the participants informing the work representative of the target communities? Again, not about the technology, but something that could be considered and engaged within a project. So, bridging the technical and the social. So to bridge this gap, we must embrace multiple assessment methods. So quantitative metrics are invaluable for showing what and how much. They're irreplaceable for that. But qualitative methods reveal why, how, and for whom. And participatory approaches, those as described by both Lucas and Flavia, they help ensure relevance and legitimacy. And then systems perspectives, they help uncover structural factors that enable or constrain the change that's being sought by the technology design. So this type of work with stakeholders supports legitimacy, alignment, and grounding the abstract to operationalize, among other things. So for example, we ran a workshop with public protection to disaster relief stakeholders, and this really demonstrated the value of such engagement. So PPDRs, the stakeholders clarified that context is critical. Quality of life can mean survival during a blackout, but during a pandemic, it might actually mean mental health. Trust means reliable data during a wildfire, but again, during a pandemic, it actually potentially means trust with the state. So their core insight was that just adding technology alone doesn't automatically achieve values. The human element, such as cooperation or societal resilience, is crucial. And they also showed that values are interconnected. For instance, safety can't be achieved without trust, and resilience is incomplete without education. Doing this kind of work also holds us as a community to account to whose values are we considering. Lesson 3, making purpose and decision clear. So without a clear purpose, the main lesson that we got from our engagement with external experts is that if you don't have a clear purpose or clear success factors, or what clear decisions supposed to be made with an indicator, it's not possible to assess if that indicator is right for the job. These pieces of the puzzle are absolutely mandatory. KPIs are not descriptive. They're towards a goal. So to ensure that our indicators capture the full scope of societal change, we propose thinking about KPIs across different dimensions of value diffusion. And we've seen these different dimensions engaged within the projects and the literature. These range from basically focusing on technical capability to a community's ability to benefit to long-term societal shifts. Now, these kinds of dimensions are also informed by, and they're actually further elaborated by Hexa X2's work, where they consider more than just social sustainability, but here they're intended to actually put into more concrete terms a tool for clarifying purpose and decisions. Each dimension supports different types of decisions and different types of actions. For example, if we're focusing on the dimension 1, technical capability, can the technology deliver the needed performance? Excuse me. You'll look, for example, at network reliability. It's a decision for an engineer that can change design. But if you're looking at dimension 4, can a regional system leverage or redistribute that value that's being offered? Maybe you're going to look at the compatibility of regional systems with a prototype. And that's a decision for business strategists or the business modelers to actually engage with. This is not an engineering decision. So here with this, the intention is not to prescribe or to limit, but to support discussions within the projects and communities around what a KVI should be informing, who should work with the results of those indicators. Lesson 4, harmonize the value landscape. So right now, the projects could use a structured approach to guide from abstract value to actionable indicators. I'm going to go over this really fast because this is something that we've been doing actively with the projects, and this will be part of our final results that we provide. But one of the things that's needed is a way to harmonize not just the definitions of the value, what objectives should be focused on, and helping to understand what of those should be prioritized under those key values, but then actually harmonizing the process to get down to indicator. There's two things that can be standardized when it comes to value-based indicators. One is the indicators themselves, which has some promise, but working with our external experts also has demonstrated limitations because it's difficult to translate indicator from context to context. Another is to standardize the process, and therefore you can harmonize across in different types of ways. These are different decisions that need to get made, but it's one that could be particularly valuable. And this is one process that's been fed back on by the projects and seems to actually be helping create some of this harmonization. And the last thing that I want to provide a little bit of thought process on is getting from value snapshots to sustainable trajectories. So basically, how do you use KVIs to really think about social sustainability as a process? Now, looking through the literature, we were able to identify 5 different principles that really make this work. Accessing holistically, so thinking across all 3 pillars at once, not one at a time. Mapping interdependencies that allow you to then also understand the trade-offs, so understand how actions in one area creates consequences in others. Orienting towards the future, so don't just look at short-term indicators or the present output. See what you can do to understand what in the system could support as a proxy for future improvement. Ground this in stakeholder engagement and theory. I know I'm harping on this, and I'm the 3rd person to do this in a row, but this also is coming out of the sustainability literature, and really be transparent about the boundaries and the limitations of the work being done. Practically speaking, I'll go over this quite fast, but what this means is looking at all 3 elements at once and understanding what features and how they're intertwined to achieving the end goal. So digital inclusivity, for example. The literature shows quite clearly that it requires the successful intertwining of access, affordability, literacy, and skills. That's our handprint, but our positives, but also actively managing the financial and environmental costs of new infrastructure. That's the footprint. So that needs to be engaged holistically together and understanding these interdependencies to understand then how to manage the decision and to see what's going on in terms of the potential for sustainability. And the indicators can look quite different. So they can look, for example, at if documented barriers to access are actually being addressed. And this could be done by external audit through stakeholder engagement, or looking at if not just looking at, for example, is the cost of an individual device or service less, but look if operators have identified viable economic pathways to actually take that forward. For the environmental, it's not just looking at energy efficiency within a lab, but also looking at experts to see if they actually assess a rebound risk that would counter that energy efficiency. These are the proxies towards that system that any technology would be entering into with the interdependencies that allow us to really understand sustainability. Now, the last thing I want to do, this is my last slide, is actually say we have some next steps that need to be done here. So while we're trying hard to provide a bit of a tool set and create a framework that can keep projects going, there's still some key decisions that need to get made. Some of these I've already talked about. We need to finish harmonizing the definitions and the priorities within the values. We need to develop the governance framework for navigating trade-offs. We need to build the capabilities within the projects to be different types of skills. But we also need some sort of governance mechanism for shared accountability and long-term impact. Sustainability isn't about a 3-year project. How do we take the KPI lessons from one project and pass them on to the next? How do we track the activities throughout? We need to develop a clear picture of success. That will help us understand how to prioritize and how to navigate those trade-offs. And we also need to make KPIs indispensable to design decisions. So we need to improve how they are integrated fundamentally into the innovation process so that they aren't just an added bonus where KPIs drive, but they drive as an equal to the KPIs and the other performance features. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katrina, for highlighting all the challenges, potentials of such a framework with a forward-looking perspective of the usage of the KPIs. Now we move to the final presentation. Our next speaker is Eleni Chemu from Nova Telecommunications, and she will present the KPI ontology. Eleni, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen, Eva?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Eleni Chemu. I work with Nova Telecommunications. Within this 6G4Society project, we have been leading the work on the standardization with emphasis on creating this key result of the key value indicator ontology, which is what I'll be presenting today. So this work has been very much a collective effort. It has been achieved through collaboration with many projects, with SNSJU initiatives, and with discussions across the 6G community. And today I'd like to share how we approached the challenge of structuring values in 6G, what this KPI ontology actually is and what it achieves, and how it helps us connect values to evidence. So I'd like to start from something that we have all experienced in this project and probably beyond it. This work, I also like to note that it completes and it progresses also the KPI work that we have done in the project that Katrina previously presented. Over the last years, there has been an enormous amount of work done into defining values, impacts, key value indicators across the 6G projects, and this is a real achievement of the community. But at the same time, when we step back and look at the bigger picture, we see a recurring challenge. We see that values and KPIs are often defined slightly differently from one project to another. They are reported at different levels of detail with different maturity. They're not always connected in the same way to use cases, to stakeholders, to technological enablers. And the result that we notice is not that this work lacks quality, it's that it is becoming difficult to compare and to use this knowledge beyond the individual projects themselves. And this is where policymakers, where standardization bodies, where projects struggle, not because this evidence is missing, but because it is fragmented and there is no coherent structure to rely on. So the challenge we identified in 6G4Society is that there is a lack of a shared structure that can connect values, indicators, and their evidence in a coherent way. This is where the 6G KVI ontology comes along. This ontology is not a new list of values. It's not a new set of KVIs that replaces existing work. In fact, it builds directly on what already exists across projects. What it provides primarily is a shared semantic framework. It is a common grammar, if you will, that allows the different projects, the sectors, the actors to express their values and their indicators in compatible ways. You can think of it as a way to organize and relate what we already know within a single and coherent structure. So this makes possible to trace how a societal value is reflected in indicators, how those indicators are supported by technical evidence, and in which contexts and for which stakeholders they matter. And I think this is particularly important to emphasize today. This ontology is not about closing the discussion. It is about leaving behind something reusable. It's a legacy asset, a foundation that others can build on, can adopt, and can extend as 6G evolves. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip this slide that explains that the methodology and how we started the design choices that we implemented, and move directly to the ontology architecture. So I'd like to briefly show you how it is structured. At a high level, the ontology is designed as a modular and layered semantic model. It means that it is organized in clearly defined layers. It's with a specific role, but they are all connected to one another. So at the top, we have the normative elements. We have values, we have the objectives, their impacts, what they define in 6G, what it should achieve. Then we move to indicators, stakeholders, operational contexts, and finally to the technological foundations. What is important here is not the number of classes or the technical details, but it's the logic. It's every concept is explicitly related to others through semantic relationships, and this allows us to trace how societal value is translated into indicators, how those indicators are applied in specific use cases, and how they are ultimately supported in concrete technologies. This architecture is, of course, machine readable. It uses semantic web standards, which means it is not just a conceptual model. It's something that can be reused, can be queried, can be integrated into other workflows. So in short, this architecture gives us a coherent map of the 6G value ecosystem. So moving on to the next slide, now I will walk through the specific layers that we have in this ontology, starting with the first one, which is the foundation of the entire ontology. This layer captures the normative dimension of 6G. So in other words, what 6G should achieve and why it matters. It brings together three elements. First, we have the key values, which, as you know, express the fundamental societal, environmental, economic principles that 6G is expected to uphold and to achieve. These are the reasons we care about 6G beyond technical performance. Then we have objectives, which translate those values into more concrete intentions, what 6G should aim to achieve in practice. We have the impacts, which describe the expected or observed impacts and effects of the 6G technologies on those sustainability pillars. So this layer, conceptually, it is deliberately not about the measurement yet. Its role is to establish a shared understanding of direction and of purpose. So that we can assess later why we are developing 6G in the first place. So once this foundation is in place, the next question that naturally becomes, how do we assess whether those values and objectives are actually being delivered? That's where we bring this indicator layer. This is where the assessment really begins. This layer connects the indicators used to evaluate 6G. And those indicators can be both value-based and technical. It includes, therefore, the key value indicators, which assess the progress towards the values, the key sustainability indicators, which focus on long-term and systemic sustainability aspects. And this layer also includes KPIs where they have been defined and where they are relevant in value propositions, which provide the technical and the system level evidence. So it is important here to note that these indicators are not treated as separate worlds. In this ontology, values and technology are assessed together. So this allows us to move beyond assumptions like, oh, this technology is efficient or this technology is sustainable, and instead ask efficient or sustainable in relation to which values, in which context, and it's supported by what evidence. So the next question is for whom we are assessing values. We have been in this discussion, we heard this discussion from previous speakers as well, and we also reiterated in the ontology work. We explicitly introduce the stakeholder entity, the stakeholder class. So stakeholders should be included not as an afterthought, but as a core element of value assessment. And then in this later, the different actors involved or affected by 6G, which are the citizens, the industry, the operators, policymakers, etc. It captures their roles, their perspectives, who benefits, who decides, who evaluates, and who may be impacted. And it is important to create those links from stakeholders directly to values and indicators, because the ontology recognizes that value is not universal or abstract, and the same indicator can matter differently depending on who you are and how you are affected. So we can make more transparent and inclusive decisions. Moving on, we are frequently presented with the concept that values, indicators, and stakeholders only make sense when placed in a concrete and operational context. And therefore, we present the context where use cases are actively being taken into account. In designing this layer, we made the very deliberate choice. We did not want values and indicators to be an abstraction. We wanted them to be assessed into context, in concrete use cases and deployment scenarios. And that's why this layer models these elements. It models the technical scenarios, the vertical domains that the reporting projects have addressed. These are the environments where the technologies are tested and deployed, where values become tangible. One key reason for this design choice is that the value, again, is context dependent. So an indicator like trust, like inclusion, it does not mean the same thing in every situation. What matters, for example, in the healthcare domain may be different from what matters in an industrial context. Another important consideration to address is comparability. Across the projects that we examined, we observed that the KPIs are often reported without a clear description of the operational setting, and this makes it difficult to compare results or understand why indicators differ without a common structure. So we need to explicitly model these operational contexts in order to allow us to say where and under which conditions something was measured. Finally, we have the technological layer, which anchors everything in the actual technology. This layer represents the technical foundations of 6G. So the technologies, the capabilities, the concrete enablers, as they are reported in the ecosystem. And its role in this hierarchy is to make explicit how technical choices support or sometimes can constrain the delivery of societal and sustainability values. So we undertook this challenge to map technological enabler taxonomies, both existing and reported across the ecosystem, and attempted to create links to the upper layers. And through those semantic links, the ontology allows us to trace how a specific technology or capability contributes to certain indicators and to higher level values. So links like that are important because for engineers and designers, mainly because it shows that the values are not just abstract aspirations, but they are realized through design decisions, and those links need to exist in a common structure. One point that I want to emphasize is that the KVI ontology was never designed for a single type of user. From the start, we assumed a diverse 6G ecosystem where different actors interact in different ways with values, but they still need a shared frame of reference. So for researchers and for projects, which is the primary target, the ontology supports structuring KVI work in a way that is comparable across projects rather than isolated reportments. For policymakers and public authorities, the ontology can provide a way to assess and compare against societal and sustainability priorities using this structured and transparent evidence. For industry actors, for operators, for technology providers, it becomes a way to understand how the technical choices relate to societal values and how those value considerations can be integrated into design and deployment. For designers and system architects, they can use the ontology as a guide to embed values in the design process and to understand how those architectural elements may influence value impacts. And finally, standardization bodies. This ontology provides a common vocabulary and a methodological foundation that can support this harmonization across this ecosystem that we notice. What matters most is that all these actors can use the same structure even if they engage with different parts of it. So the ontology acts as a third reference point. It enables collaboration without forcing uniformity. So I'd like to situate the KVI ontology within the broader standardization landscape. One of our key intentions in 6G4Society was to ensure that this work does not remain a purely research-oriented output, but it can actually support pre-standardization and standardization processes. The role of the KVI ontology here is very specific. It does not aim to standardize the outcomes, the targets, or the fixed indicators. Instead, it standardizes how those value-based evidence is structured and communicated. In other words, it provides a shared vocabulary and a clear value flow, and it helps align contributions coming from different projects, sectors, and disciplines. And this makes it particularly suitable from a pre-standardization aspect perspective, and for other consensus building activities and as an input to standardization bodies. So in this sense, you can think of it as acting like a bridge. It translates the research outputs into a form that it is usable, it is transparent, and it is comparable, which is exactly what those processes require. And let me close by summarizing the key messages that I hope you take away from this work. That 6G clearly requires value-based assessment along with technical performance. Values, sustainability, trust, inclusion, societal benefit, they are no longer optional. They are central to how 6G will be judged. This KVI ontology, it provides a complete and coherent semantic structure that connects those values to indicators, to stakeholders, to use cases, and to technologies, and allows us to move from project-specific assessments to comparable evidence across the ecosystem. And it's important to emphasize right now that this structure is now in place. So what happens next with this work is, first, this KVI ontology can now be used as a reference framework so that all those pieces of the puzzle can be mapped to a search structure rather than redefined every time. It is a semantic foundation for pre-standardization. It can be applied directly in reporting and assessment workflows. It is also the core structure that is stable, and the ontology is designed to be extended through reuse. So new use cases, new indicators, new technologies can be added, can be mapped without breaking compatibility. And finally, this isn't work that we can do alone. The real impact here comes through the adoption of the structure, through shared collaboration across projects, policymakers, and industry and standardization bodies. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eleni, for presenting this important key output of the project, of course, as well as for all the other speakers. We also appreciate many thoughts-provoking questions coming in through the chat. We are continuously answering them and addressing them. Due to the time constraints, we unfortunately need to move to the next session. We won't be able to accept more questions. The panel discussion, the next one, will be about the interconnections between the three sustainability dimensions, so the social, environmental, and economic, and of course the challenges and achievements of addressing them together in a, let's say, holistic way. So now it's my pleasure to give the floor to you again, Katrina, who is going to moderate this session. Katrina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eva. And actually, I want to thank all of the panel right here, because really they're the ones who are going to be talking and just letting me ask them questions and provoke answers. So we have here 5 experts that will be part of the session. I'll have them introduce themselves because they will do a much better job than I will do for them. But the first thing I want to say specifically is that this session was the intention of it is, so you just heard a lot of work around social sustainability and very social sustainability focused. And so the intention here is to actually think more holistically around the concept of sustainability, paying attention to the other pillars and also what it means to actually just generally engage sustainability as a broader project within the 6G community. So with that, I'd like to very quickly go round, and if each of you guys can keep to 30 seconds, half a minute, try. I'd love you to introduce yourselves and explain a little bit about where you are and in this work and what you'd like to see out of sustainability. So I'm going to start with Maria because you're the first on my screen.
Thank you very much, Katrina. So my name is Maria Matin-Mikko-Blue, and I come from the Finnish 6G flagship research program, and I'm there working as the Director of Sustainability and Regulation. And I've been involved promoting this whole sustainability topic in the 6G R&D since the very, very beginning 7 years ago. And currently, I was involved heavily in the HexaX and HexaX2 project continuum. In the sustainability topic, we led the economic sustainability research in HexaX2 project, and that has ended and all the results are published. And as Chiara mentioned, this use case work, connecting the use cases to the sustainability, it was awarded in the SNSJU Awards. So it's remarkable work done by a lot of people as well. I think I used my 30 seconds. I'll speak more later.
That's fabulous. Thank you. So next is Javier.
Hello, everyone. This is Javier Garcia from Telefonica. I work as a research portfolio manager and innovation manager at Telefonica. Most of you, I think, know me because I'm trying to establish some sort of coordination between the different working groups set up under the 6G SNS and 6G IA Association. And actually, I'm dealing with, one of the specific topics that I'm trying to engage with the working groups leaders is how they are dealing with KPI. Thanks. And Katrina, a very nice presentation. You just set some light on the work that I'm trying to do in coordination with the rest of the working groups leaders. So thank you very much in advance for the work that you did.
I was hoping so, and I realized I missed a topic, but I'm going to throw it at you later. So we'll get it. We'll get it all very good. So next is Indrashki.
Hi, thanks, Katrina. This is Indrakshi. I'm representing Marie Curie Action, Coalesce, in this particular discussion. So just a bit of background on myself. I'm head of research division at one of the research divisions at Walton Institute. We are a national research institute and the largest ICT research institute in Ireland. We are associated with the Southeast Technological University in Waterford. And that's all from my side, I guess.
Thank you very much. So, Mir, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Katrina, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mir Reishi from Gigasys Solutions. I'm CEO of Gigasys Solutions. I was a project manager at SNS Big Green and a coordinator of SNS Ultra 6G. So these two are dealing with this overwhelming with energy efficiency and also trust, which are elements of sustainability. I'm also vice chair of the recently established sustainability working group, this is a sustainability working group, and I've been heavily involved in sustainability activities in the SNS community from the beginning.
Thank you, Hassan. Thank you, Mir. Next, Hassan. Sorry, my brain's jumping ahead of me.
No problem. Hi, everyone. Hi, Katrina. Thank you for inviting me today here. I'm Hassan, a configuration manager at Rio Wireless. I'm also a visiting professor at Sheffield University. I'm today representing Sustain 6G project. The Sustain 6G project started early this year, so we are still the early stages, still developing the sustainability framework. And previously, I'm still involved in TrialsNet project. Real Wireless was leading the KVI work, the KVI work in TrialsNet. Thank you.
Great, fabulous. We've got a nice broad range of experience and views, from the hands-on work to KVIs to thinking about the bigger questions that we need to address. So what I want to do today is have sort of three different sets of thematic questions for you. So the first is just overall talking about 6G and sustainability. Then I will ask you questions about challenges, and then about achievements and possibilities. So we'll go through that order so we end on the positive notes. So first, overall, and I'm going to pick on you guys, so you know, but you may each please jump in and answer, and I might pick on 2 people per question, just as a warning, since I can't make eye contact with you the same I would in person. So just giving you a heads up here. So Javier, I'm going to put you on the spot first, which is basically, how do you think the definition of success in 6G projects is evolving to incorporate sustainability?
Okay, that's a challenging question, and actually I will ask with the same type of categorization. I would say you just in the previous panel you just mentioned how challenging this is for projects, right, to incorporate sustainable metrics into their scientific work. But it's challenging. I think it's on a slow progress that projects are doing, right, in the community in general. But there is progress being done. But I'm optimistic in the sense that this is the first time I think that in the mobile networks generations we are talking about this step about the sustainability and how to measure sustainable aspects already in research activities, right? I'm not talking about the rollout phases. When you work in rollout phases, you start incorporating these sustainable metrics according to the SDGs, for example, framework. But in research, I think this is the first time that we are dealing with the topic, at least from a holistic viewpoint. And that's a good thing, right? And that's part of the problem that we are having now in the community, because we don't have a previous framework that we can use as a reference. Some of the issues that you just mentioned during the KVI presentation, I totally shared these issues with you, right? From a sustainability perspective, I would say, not just for the KVI perspective. You mentioned one thing that I totally shared with you. One of the issues that the projects are having, and this is one of the reasons why the adoption is challenging, is that we don't have the skilled people, let's say, inside the projects, right? I'm talking about people with sustainability skills or skills related to sustainability that we can incorporate to scientific work, right? Technical people and scientific people, they know very well how to deal with technical KPIs, how to measure latency, how to measure throughput, how to deal with technical metrics, but they don't actually know how to deal with the sustainability aspects, because actually they don't have a framework that they can follow. And the other important aspect that you just mentioned is the TRL level. I think that we were talking about the TRL. That's another thing, right, that we should consider in this slow adoption of sustainable metrics. It's not the same if you're working in a project with TRL 1 to 4, for example, which you're trying to validate in a specific technology, and your only goal is to how to work with a specific technology or a specific concept from a theoretical viewpoint and validate this technology in a controlled environment. When you move upwards and when you work in TRL 5 to 7, then you are working in trials, then you're working with final users, and then the adoption of sustainable metrics is it should be easier for the projects to follow, right? So in terms of FlexX, I would mention these two main things that we are now having in 6G, because 6G is in research stage right now, right? So the combination of these two aspects, TRL dependency and lack of skills, is probably what lies behind this slow and challenging adoption of sustainable metrics in 6G. These are my 2 cents, I would say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Does anybody have anything they want to add to that, or can I move on to the next question?
I would just quickly add that the research is always about both the methods and then the results. So in a way, this whole sustainability is introducing interdisciplinarity in a new way. And at the same time, we are developing as the community those research methods. And the KVI method by SNVC is one example of, and then that is evolving. So it's both the development of those new methods and then the results that we get by applying those methods.
Mir, were you also wanting to say something?
Yeah, just to complement what Mario said and also Javier explained. I think the success today is for the project gradually it's becoming less about hitting perfect KPIs, but more about demonstrating credible methodologies. And also transparency is about trade-offs, learning how different sustainability dimensions interact and so on. So that's, I think, the factor of this success that is being evolved for the project.
Very lovely insights, guys. Thank you very much. So, Maria, I'm now going to pick on you with a question, which is, what does holistic sustainability, do you think, actually mean in practice for 6G projects?
Many things. And I think the consensus is that we have environmental, social, and economic sustainability. And that is a huge consensus that we reached already several years ago. So those 3 interrelated pillars are there. And I think all are addressing them now. And then we have sustainable 6G and 6G4Society, those 2 dimensions. So that already is 6 separate perspectives, which again are very much interlinked. So that is it's great that we have that consensus. We did not have that 7 years ago when we did the first white paper on 6G and sustainability. So that is clearly one thing. Then there are many other classifications. Like there is the business side, regulation side, technology development side. That is yet another 3 perspectives into this whole big picture. And then the stakeholder thing is another one. It's been mentioned a lot of times, and I'm so happy that within the project we now take it seriously, the stakeholder perspective in the whole thing. Stakeholders have very different roles in the ecosystem, very different needs and expectations. So that's now kind of built in the way we do this sustainability research.
Thanks, Maria. So actually, I wanted to ask in Droshki, if I can ask you a follow-up question, which is, what are the key issues you think the 6G or the SNS community should cover when considering these elements of sustainability?
Yeah, sure. Again, I come from I'm a fundamental researcher, so I come from a very different background to what is being spoken here. Sometimes I feel that these definitely we see in the call document that we have to go for sustainability. We have to consider sustainability matrix and how we are going to make our technology and algorithms sustainable. But then we are also pushing towards technologies which are never going to be sustainable. A very concrete example is AI. So we are going to apply AI in every possible layer of the 6G network, while artificial intelligence or AI itself, any large model to train an AI model, it takes a lot of computational power and computational memory. It completely goes against, and also a lot of energy is consumed. So it kind of goes against what we are trying to achieve in terms of sustainability. So I always feel it's contradictory that we are talking about radio access network, the layer in the radio access network where everything will be automated autonomous, and definitely AI and other optimization techniques will play a huge part in that. And while we will need a lot of energy and resources to maintain or operate that, which is again sustainable. So I'm always conflicting in this way, like how to build in this joint optimization, both in terms of resources as well as in terms of techniques or algorithms that we are developing to achieve the goals of 6G or any future networks that are going to come in.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Does anybody want to add anything to that?
If I may, I would like to add here that the whole concept of holistic approaches about this, right? So the concept to me is about managing interdependencies, navigating trade-offs, and designing systems that remain environmentally responsible, economically viable, and socially trusted over time. So we cannot just look at one aspect of the solution, one layer in the network. We should look overall. This is a very hard task, and it's a process, it's a framework. But the work that's been done, for example, in 6G Society, will basically pave the way towards this ultimate goal, I think.
That's a very, very good point. Mir, just so you know, your sound is a little bit crackly. So just if you can help with that. You're understandable, but you're a little bit crackly. So just so you know. Hassan, now it's your turn to get picked on. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about where you've seen siloed approaches to sustainability fail in previous work or previous generations, and what 6G could maybe learn from that failure, actually.
No, thank you, Katrina. So I'm not sure if we can really call it failure because we usually don't tend to look at sustainability when we work on research project. So we start really talking about sustainability in research project probably 5-10 years ago. So it is a recent topic. It is a recent topic for research project, as engineers usually tend to spend their time developing technology and not probably looking at societal effect of the technology or probably the economical effect and so on. So I wouldn't see it as a failure. If I look at some of your presentation, particularly your presentation and your colleague presentation from 6G4Society that were presented before, I see a lot of challenges, and I think that's right. That's right. That's correct. It's normal to have a lot of challenges when you start working on a topic recently. So probably we need a little bit more time to when the dust will settle, and then we will have probably more solid framework to work from.
No, absolutely right. There always has to be growing pains, and then figuring out what you need to support, what scaffolding you need without limiting the growth artificially. It's really a difficult piece of research at the early stages. So, Mir, if I can ask you another question. So when and this is thinking about, from almost the sustainability working group head, I want to ask you, but also from your general experience. So when sustainability pillars conflict, so for example, when the most economically efficient solution has environmental costs, so you might have this conflict, a conflict there. Who should have the final say, and based on what criteria?
Well, I think the criteria should be explicit rather than implicit, right? When we have explicit criteria, then we can basically, for example, we can start with what is being optimized, what is being sacrificed or constrained, why this choice is acceptable in this context, and under what conditions it should be revisited. In this sense, we can deal with the issue rather than deal with it implicitly, basically. So to me, sustainability by design does not mean maximizing all pillars simultaneously, which is often possible or almost impossible. But it means making value-laden choices, visible, contestable, and reversible. In that sense, we can deal with this issue.
Yeah, so the point is basically, if this is more explicit, it becomes easier to understand who should be making those choices and under what criteria. So,
Exactly. By the way, can you hear me better now?
it's about the same, but you're still understandable, so it's fine. So it's all good. So, Maria, I wanted to come back to you about a challenge that basically every single presentation prior mentioned, which is about how you fold the people aspects into the work, the stakeholders into the work. But I also wanted to ask you how the planet aspect. So on the one point, like there's a lot of talk about the different ways to fold in stakeholders and different ways that they can be give voice to values and acceptance. But how do we do this for the planet in the same way?
I think the first step already is that we acknowledge that planet can also be considered as a stakeholder. It doesn't have a voice in the way that a stakeholder has a voice, but already that listing it as a stakeholder and then considering it. Because we often do this stakeholder, like how to identify, first we identify them, then we characterize what are their needs, benefits, constraints, and so on, like different elements of the stakeholders, and then their interactions, and finally the management actions, the governance part, which is very much in line with what you presented about the whole KVI work. So there it comes that who is representing whom? And how do we really get the right voices heard? Because we just ask some stakeholder something, we may not get that answer, which is really what we're looking for. So that's why it applies to all research. So if we have a research question, we don't ask that research question from the people that we're trying to collect the data from, because that's not how research works. That's why it's challenging, and it requires a lot of like different ways of collecting that data. Then another thing is those decision-making places, and regulation here plays the role. Ultimately, regulator is the stakeholder who then makes long-term compromises between conflicting stakeholder claims by consultations, by different, like collecting, like gathering the stakeholders together. And the environment, again, is not there. But the regulator is the one who is now representing actually the environment by setting the environmental sustainability requirements on companies, the greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, and so on. They are a way of the regulator then to be in terms representing planet, and I think that's the closest. Of course, consumer advocacy bureaus, like all kinds of advocacy things, they do a remarkable job in this. They really do. They are another one the closest to the representative of the planet.
That's a very, very great point, which is the voice doesn't have to come directly. It can come from representatives, and that's something to think about how we engage. Does anybody else have any thoughts on this in terms of their experience in their work?
I think, if I may, Katrina, if I can jump in, we have now a very difficult geopolitical landscape, right? So I think that's the main problem that we have. But there is a universal language we all understand, which is money, right? So probably the economic dimension, the economic pillar is the one that may help us drive the discussion first, and then we can think about the other pillars, right? Because at this point, we need to work with trade-offs, unfortunately, right? We cannot put all the pillars in the same dimension. But when we talk about, how to plan it, the impact on around sustainability, I think the first discussion that we should take into account is the economic, economic language. At least this is the first approach that we, as an MNO, we follow sometimes, right? Because now with the current geopolitical landscape, it's too hard to keep this conversation with other regions of the world. Just to complement a little bit what Mark just said.
No, thank you. And while I've got you, because I think this also ties, I had a question for you as well directly. And actually, Hassan, I'm going to give it to you in the background to think about, because I want you to think about this a little bit too. And actually, I want everybody to think about this one, which is how far upstream or downstream should we be assessing 6G sustainability?
I think this. I can jump in, I guess, right? Or this question was addressed. Okay. Okay. We need to involve all the the stakeholders for sure, right? In the ecosystem, and that includes, for example, device manufacturers as well, right? Which is somehow tricky because the device manufacturers or vendors in general, they want to sell more, right? And probably they'll have to, they have to come up with new equipment for 6G, which goes, in the opposite direction of environmental impact, right? But it drives economic impact for the positive because it drives the ecosystem, right? We will be able to provide better service as an MNO, right, to our clients thanks to the work that the vendors will do. But we will be able to, for example, find a trade-off in which we will be able to reduce part of the 5G equipment that we already have in our networks. That's the approach, for example, we followed between 5G non-standalone and 5G standalone, right? And that's a lesson learned. It didn't work well for the MNOs. And I'm speaking on behalf of an MNO, right? From an economic viewpoint, from an environmental viewpoint, perhaps it worked well. I didn't quantify that, right? Or my Telefonica team didn't quantify that. But we should consider, in terms of upstreams or downstream, I think finding trade-offs that work well for the whole stakeholders. In this case, I'm just putting in the center of the question MNOs and vendors. That's something that I think it should be discussed when 6G deployment comes, right, for the future. That's at least a viewpoint from MNO here.
No, it's great. It's great. This is why I started with you and then realized actually this is a question for everybody because there might be slightly different answers. So Mir, since you're unmuted, I'm going to ask you next. So what do you think? How far upstream or downstream should we be looking? Actually, Mir, we can't hear you right now. No, we still can't hear you. While you figure it out, feel free to just chime in for a second. But then I'll ask if Hassan, Maria, or Andrashki wants to add anything to that, to that about the upstream and where should we be looking for sustainability in the innovation process.
Well, I can always mention here that this whole stakeholder analysis, like the stakeholder thinking as a tool, because it reveals what those stakeholders are thinking, and then we've noticed it so many times that then we talk about for example, the mobile communication ecosystem, and then when spectrum is the perfect example, prime example, when we talk about spectrum, then when you listen to one stakeholder, that stakeholder often is speaking in the voice of its customer. So that we have these customer-supplier relationships, and when you listen to one stakeholder, they try to sell to their customer. So they often adopt that basic thinking that the customer is also promoting. So we have to understand this in every interaction that we have when we're observing and when we're talking about sustainability. And we have to start demanding that. And it's great now that operators are demanding that. And then all of us as end users, we can start to demand the knowledge of the sustainability impact of the devices we're buying, of the subscriptions and so on. So in that role to demand those sustainable solutions, that's the key to this success.
That's great. That's great. So, Andrashki, I'm going to ask you another type of question, speaking about success. But I wanted to ask you if there's specific technological breakthroughs in 6G that are proving to be, game changers in sustainability that you've seen or that you know of.
Yeah, sure. So some of the things I think that, or some of the applications that 6G is going to bring in, one specific one is the integrated sensing and communication. Now we don't really, I mean, it has different kind of purposes or different kind of applications. It can go from geofencing to many other kind of areas that can benefit from it. But I think one of the benefits that we can leverage in the process is that sensing the environment also. So kind of, if we can sense the environment at the same time and use it as a trade-off or as our or fit it into the KPIs, then I think we can achieve a joint optimization in terms of 6G. That's one application that I can think of. And another area that I would like to mention is joint optimization of the energy network, like the microgrid and the smart grids, and also the communication network that we are familiar with. So kind of how we can make sure that the energy which is produced in the local community, how we can make consumers as prosumers and kind of produce their own energy supply, and at the same time that can support the ICT network in the local area. So that can be another way of optimizing. So
no, it's great. It's great to see what opportunities emerge and to get some concrete examples. So I really appreciate you providing them. And we're running short on time. So Hassan, I'm going to give you the last question before I give you guys a chance to actually offer any final thoughts, if you have any. So Hassan, because you've worked in a few different projects at this point doing this type of work. So what do you think successful projects need to do in their planning phase to really actually enable sustainability achievements?
Well, thanks for that. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are still early days on this topic from my point of view. One important thing is to set a realistic target. So to have a realistic target and realistic expectation from the work. So sustainability has already 3 different dimensions, and 6G can serve many verticals. In those verticals, we may have many stakeholders. So as you can see, it's a very complex system and many stakeholders involved, and so it's very difficult to satisfy all of them. So it is just when people start to work on a project, when they want to set the scene, have a realistic target, and just concentrate on their use cases.
That sometimes you just need the practical reminder that we can't promise the world. We need to actually understand. And I mean, that goes back to some of the conversation around transparency that's been had. We need to be transparent about what we're doing, both to ourselves so we can do it, but also externally so that we know what we're promising. So on that note, I wanted to ask very quickly if anybody has any final thoughts that they're absolutely desperate to get across before I close our panel session. I'm going to guess the answer to that is no. So I want to say actually to my panel, first I want to say thank you. Second, our conversation, building on the previous session, has sparked quite a few comments and questions in the chat. If you can, over the next little bit, go and respond to some of these as much as you can, whether they're to you or not. If you have a thought on them, your opinion would be valued in response to these questions. Some of them are directed to one of us from 6G4Society directly, but you might still also have thoughts on what this could be. So please don't just put your thoughts in this way so that we can actually engage further from your expertise as we go. And I want to thank you guys very much for taking the time for being here today and joining us in your thought process. It's been a very enlightening discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Katrina, and for all the speakers indeed for this insightful and engaging discussion. As Katrina said, we have seen many questions coming in and comments in the chat on the sustainability panel, so feel free to reply for those in the chat and by our speakers. And we will now break for 5 minutes only because we have to shrink a little bit because of the time limitation we have in the agenda. So let's say that we will break until 4:15, okay, and we will continue with the second panel discussion on policy concerns and recommendations. Okay, thank you very much.
pense que ça commence.
Okay, we now continue with our second panel discussion. Welcome back. This one will focus on reflecting on policy concerns and recommendations, which have been deriving from our project's lessons learned and findings. So it's my pleasure to give you the floor, Marie-Christine from PRC, who will moderate this session. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Eva. So I have the difficult task to do the final debate of this afternoon. So hope that we'll have contribution from you all. And also I will check the question in the chat. So to give insight into your thinking. So yes, so the aim of this panel is to highlight some of our policy findings and also to adopt a forward-looking perspective in order to try to identify way forward, what could be changed, what could be improved in the process in the research and innovation for 6G. So that is a very broad goal, and we'll try to do our best. So I would like to ask a few questions. Chiara is back with us. Yes, so yes, good. Yes, because maybe as an introduction, it would be good to have a broader consideration. We see that there is this tension all the time between economics, business, and also societal legitimacy. And there should be some mechanism to avoid this and to include the societal dimension. So how can we ensure that economic competitiveness and societal legitimacy are treated as two sides of the same coins and not as separated issue or isolated issues? So that will be a question for Chiara, but if some other people want to join, I mean, if because in the panel we have a different speaker. So if Carmela, Margot, or Hannah want to join, they can contribute as well.
I can have a first go, no problem.
Yes.
And then, of course, I'm relying on my on the other experts on the panel. I mean, I of course don't have the full answer, otherwise I would have probably discussed this with you beforehand. But let me maybe highlight two things. The first one is this multi-stakeholder and multi-dimensional approach and the multidisciplinary integration. So I think the good news for all of us and all of you is that, of course, there's a need of right mix of people that are part of a project to make this happen. But the key news is that the right mix of people is part of our evaluation, actually. So when pertinent and duly justified, it is very valuable to embed this approach with the interdisciplinary in the R&D. Now, I guess it is difficult, I hear that it is not happening systematically, but I think this is possible under the current rule. So this is the first good news. The second one, and my reflection will be towards also the project's outputs that you have presented. And thank you very much for having made this as concrete as possible, I think, all throughout your priorities of the project. I think that this requires also a ready-made, easily adaptable, let's call it technology acceptance model in the widest sense, that can timely support research, development, and innovation design from phase, I would call it 0, which is from the proposal presentation. So I think that to embed those two very important dimensions, but I will talk about all the three because it's economic, societal, and environmental sustainability. All the three dimensions should have a kind of ready-made, I don't know if I can call it off-the-shelf tool that will enable people from proposal preparation to be ready to embed those important considerations from the onset. The right approach, it's of course probably mixed skills, and this is possible and valued in evaluations. Now, let me come to the governance aspect as well, because I think you mentioned a few good things which are interesting. And what we observe, I think, I'm saying an obvious thing, but it's that the trend that we have in technology is that we launch something. I'm not referring to 6G in particular, but we launch a technology which seems a brilliant idea for different purpose and use, and then we manage the kind of shortcomings or strings attached that come with it in terms of privacy, data handling, and others. So maybe my question to the community would be, do we have a best practice from digital technology where public acceptance came first, or at least it came with the technology development first phases? So I'm sorry, I'm returning the question to the community, but if we had such a good practice, I'm not sure we had in generative AI or other technologies, but if we had such good practice, I think it can become a kind of blueprint also for our R&I. Thank you, I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Margot. Thank you. Sorry, thank you to give us this overall view of what could be addressed. And maybe I will come back with some further question because the reference. Yes.
Sorry, I think, thank you very much, Kira, for the reflections point. I think maybe we can continue taking into account these points with the CLS presentation on the policy concerns and the recommendations first, and after we can get back to further.
No, that was my point, just to have the introduction and then to give the floor to the two presenters and to come back to some of the questions that arose from the first remarks from Chiara. So I don't know who will start first, if it is Margot or if it is, yes, okay.
We will do that together.
Yeah, I will start. So, okay. No, l'audio. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So let's share the presentation. Okay. Okay. So this is the presentation about the results of these 2 years of project. So you know that the project 6G4Society in these 2 years has focused on understanding the challenges of building a value-based, sustainable and socially accepted 6G technology in line with the ambition of embed societal values, particularly sustainability, into 6G development from the outset. Our aim has been twofold. First of all, identifying the key challenges involved in developing a technology grounded in EU values and broadly acceptable to society, and then to better govern and steer the variables that matter for anticipating social implications and ensuring that 6G evolves as a sustainable, legitimate and socially trusted technology. To achieve this, we carried out an extensive analysis based on the research, including revealing controversies, citizen participation, survey to SNS projects, expert engagement, direct involvement in the SNS community, active participation in the SNSQ working groups, as well as feedback from policymakers and the project external advisory board. And these activities enabled us to identify emerging risks, regulatory gaps and shortcomings in research practices within the European landscape, as well as emerging societal needs. Together, these insights informed a set of policy options and recommendations for policymakers. Our analysis was structured in 2 different levels, corresponding to 2 main concerns. The first level focused on R&I governance and practices within the SNS GU community, Here we used the principles of the research, the responsible research and innovation framework as a benchmark, promoting an approach that is reflexive, questioning underlying assumptions and examining the broader purpose and implications of research, inclusive, involving a diversity of stakeholders and perspectives, anticipatory, considering future impacts, uncertainties, and societal expectations, and responsive, enabling research directions to adapt in light of the new insights, stakeholder feedback, and societal concerns. The second level was the level where we underline specific values at risk, consisting namely on privacy, inclusion, and technological sovereignty. So building on the governance challenges identified at the first level, we highlighted those risks and analyzing also the EU regulatory framework and the EU policy strategies that defines the EU value approach on technological development. The analysis of those concerns provided essential insights for shaping 4 policy briefs. Each brief corresponds to the 4 areas that we identified. So, for what concern those areas, the first one will illustrate by my colleague Marco. For what concern privacy, privacy emerged as the most frequently cited concern across interviews and engagement activities. Privacy is here considered both as a societal value and a fundamental human right, and it is directly affected by several defining features of 6G, including integrated sensing capabilities, AI native architectures, massive IoT deployment, and multi-vendor system complexity. All those features introduce a range of challenges, including the increasing difficulty for individuals to retain control over their personal data, accountability issues within highly distributed systems, risks to data sovereignty, and algorithmic profiling and automated decision-making processes that lack sufficient transparency. For what concerns technology sovereignty, this also emerged as a critical concern, particularly when understood not only in geopolitical or economical terms, but as a form of ethical technological sovereignty. This refers to the capacity to develop technologies grounded in shared European societal values, to ensure democratic oversight of complex 6G systems, and to reduce strategic dependencies while avoiding technological isolation. Given that 6G will constitute a fundamental infrastructure on which a wide range of future technologies and services will rely, its societal impact will be both direct and far-reaching. It is therefore essential that its design and development embed the EU democratic values from the outset. Finally, we examined also the inclusion that plays a central role in shaping what a legitimate and socially acceptable 6G should look like. Key challenges relate to the multi-level nature of digital divides and to issues of procedural justice, including participatory processes that incorporate community voices, particularly those of the underrepresented groups and minorities, universal coverage, ensuring that 6G reaches all regions and populations, accessibility so that everyone can benefit from and actively participate in the opportunities created by 6G. So these three are the most important societal values that we examined during our project. And now Margot will illustrate the first one of the points we highlighted, that is the one related to the governance and practices in innovation.
So how do we, I use your microphone, okay. Yes, so we look a bit deeper at another level, at the level of processes and practices of R&I, because it is in these levels that cultural assumptions, worldview, priorities, and values are transmitted and reflected into technologies, that make technology not neutral. So if we want to build a value-based technologies, actually we cannot ignore the level of how processes and practices and the overall cultural framework is set. Because through processes and practices characteristic, this influences the way we capture, we identify, we define what is, for example, a social need, or the way we understand our impact, whether we understand it as positive or negative, for example, and therefore the way we incorporate values, the values we choose to incorporate or not, and this relapses on how, in the end, sustainability is scoped, in the sense defined, what aspects does sustainability enhances, and how sustainability is enabled. Therefore, it's important to analyze the aspects of this process and practices to influence the possibility to really create the framework for an holistic sustainability. And we did it in particular. So which are the aspects we analyzed? Especially the aspect of values, how they are determined, identified, integrated, the aspect of impact, and sustainability itself. So let's go more in depth in each of these aspects: values, impact, and then sustainability. So regarding values, the identification and the decision of what constitutes values is key to identify what constitutes a social desirability, and also to make social desirability a real transformative values of our innovation process. What we consider important is really to support activities and capacity to manage this complex relationship between values and technologies. It is an extremely complex area. It is complex because values are diverse across social groups. So, and we shall ask ourselves, whose values are we actually introjecting into technology development? Because to date, strategic orientations and innovation path still often reflect orientation that are and a culture that is more technology driven, and that sees, for example, in technology feasibility a key criterion for decision on how to proceed. So this is to be questioned, the first aspect we shall reflect upon. Instead, the more we succeed to explore diversity in the society and to engage stakeholders meaningfully, we might access different visions as to what constitute a need or a priority. This may challenge our assumptions. We may understand alternative visions and scenarios regarding the suitable future that we might want to achieve. That is why, yes, the stakeholder engagement culture shall be enhanced, but the way to do that is not given, is not easy, but certainly we have to strengthen our capacity to access diversity of vision beyond the technical and business sector for a comprehensive need exploration, but also to challenge our assumptions. And this includes, as it has already been said, exploring controversies for what they can tell us, for what is important for society. For perhaps the quadruple helix model, including citizens or associations or diverse type of stakeholder, may be a model. This could be explored in our view. But to do that, we cannot do that without multidisciplinary support, because working with value is inherently complex, is difficult, especially at low TRL. Understanding the links between low TRL, technology development, and social values and social impact, it's difficult. So we suggest that social science support shall be embedded in this type of work, especially for what concerns the guidance to value, elicitation of value, integration of value, and also translation to KPIs, but also the way to read through controversies and use them as a means to understand society. The second aspect is social impact. As I said before, the way we depict social impact influences the way we develop technology. If we believe or assume that anything we do generate a positive impact, we will act in a way, and otherwise, if we can see perhaps something more negative or a risk, we might behave differently. So we think it's important to promote mechanisms that help to anticipate, understand, and more proactively steer the broader social impact of future network technologies. We know that ICT produce impact at all levels of society, but also on individuals very deeply, and we shall be able to steer that. So far, because of a specific also characteristic of research project that lasts only a few years, we tend to focus on very direct impact, the more direct and intended impact of technologies. But instead, we shall broaden a bit this view. And this may help to strengthen, this may help to understand in advance which are perhaps the human rights and the social value that may be at stake, and enrich also our scoping and definition of social sustainability beyond perhaps the current scoping of social sustainability stresses a lot of the aspect of inclusion, of trust, and of security, but there are many other aspects. We try to highlight that in the Sustainability Task Force report, for example, but also in our deliverable, we provide a number of values that are attached to social sustainability and that deserve more attention, and the capacity to link these values to technology development, for example. And this may help inactuate adaptive measures before, early on in technology development, instead of at the end with corrective measure after, for example, as we are doing now for some other technologies, perhaps more applications, social media, etc. To do that, it's important, again, multidisciplinary competencies are key because for the exploration of these broader social implications on the broader society and on individuals. So we think that this should be done as a necessary requirements whenever there is technology development with such an expected imprinting on society. For that, a number of tools and methods for anticipatory exploration of broader and systemic and long-term transformations exist, and perhaps we shall better integrate that in current R&I processes. All the more, another contribution we have given, and it's available in our deliverable, is we try to reflect to a number of topics related to immersive communication capabilities, topics that deserve some ethical and social reflection, because of in light of how they are expected to profoundly reshape society and human experience. So we propose in our deliverable 3 topics that we think shall constitute social science research as to immersive communication impact on society. Now we move to the third aspect, sustainability itself, how we analyzed it. The triggering question was especially how shall we overcome this trade-off approach through which sustainability is most commonly understood. The context where we elaborated our reflection is always our exploration of the SNS project through our specific survey, but also interviews to specific projects and also to experts, and also some chat with policymakers. As a general consideration, let's reason globally as a general consideration as concerned industrial culture. We know that sustainability still struggles to become an inherent guiding principle within the way industry operates and how decisions are made. It is still associated to a mechanism of trade-off, as we said, of a burden, a constraint and a barrier to innovation, is conceived often as in opposition to competitiveness, to profit, to money, performance and profitability. In general, we have very few positive narratives on sustainability. This happens, some transition happen in some very selected sectors, perhaps food, clothes, but it's quite still rare. In a way, we don't identify yet with the value framework that underpins sustainability. And we still don't connect with this future-oriented responsible development. In a way, may this be an issue? Are we still heading toward priorities that cannot actually realize sustainability? So at a certain point, there is a conflict, and we believe also it's a matter of cultural issue. So now let's move to the context of the SNSJU. In the SNSJU, as we heard before from our also hosts, the situation is different. Sustainability is the object of many effort and has been integrated into deep reasoning. And especially we have the concept of co-optimization that came up in the work of the Sustainability Task Force, which is important and is aimed to overcome trade-off logic and address sustainability holistically. This deals really with finding the more contextual and right blend between the different interests of the different pillars, and this done case by case. Based on this, we believe that there are 3 main aspects that should be taken care of. The first is that sustainability should be valorized in R&I funding mechanisms even more and perhaps a bit differently. It shall become a non-negotiable requirement anymore, but also the scope of what is considered sustainability shall change. Also, from the Sustainability Task Force report as concerned environmental sustainability, also many different aspects came out. But one in particular is key. Circularity in particular is really the backbone of sustainability, is its foundation. And instead, sometimes it happened that is narrated as a phase in the value chain. It comes after, at the end of the value chain. No, actually, it is a way to think, how we do things. So this shall be even stressed more. And of course, it leads beyond energy efficiency, because sustainability is not just energy efficiency. And one other key aspect connected to circularity is, of course, the devisement of different business models where sustainability and economic value may synergically meet and are not in collision anymore. Another important aspect is really working on this perception of sustainability, of this relationship, conflicting relationship between sustainability and economic, environmental sustainability and economic sustainability and economic value. And here it comes the cultural reflection, because we are led and we are driven perhaps by a target and objectives that inherently collide with sustainability or the values of sustainability. The values of sustainability might, for example, be reuse of frugality, which are in conflict with ideas of more new that are really still underpinning our market culture. But the culture at the bottom shall also change, and we need different narratives, market narratives, policy narratives regarding sustainability, not as something to be done, but as something that is inherently valuable, is value. And finally, the third aspect we highlight is that this transition toward co-optimization or toward sustainability as a value cannot be realized without a very tight dialogue between industry and policy, where policy shall support industry, because through which criteria do we actually establish what is optimal in a co-optimization model? Through which criteria we understand what interest can be sacrificed and the other not. And so to do that, and this is my last slide, I think, is that policy is extremely important, that policy action help industry navigate these choices and options towards holistic co-optimization. This means setting the condition or guiding principle, for example, frugality, modularity, I don't know, but there are a number of values that shall be identified under sustainability. Or setting boundaries for use, incentivizing certain uses instead of others, or saying that certain uses are not possible at all, prioritizing achievement and targets, and discussing threshold and limits. For example, it's very difficult to decide when a threshold expresses the legitimate target of a specific context from or if it's instead the perdurance of a traditional different priorities set on profitability or performance. We have to reset really our way of thinking value, social and economic value, all three pillars value together. And I think that is it. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Margot and Carmela. I think that from the chat, I can see some questions that are, I think, interesting and relevant. And I will have one or two. One would be, what change would ensure that 6G development will embed societal value not as compliance requirement, but as a driver of the technological process? That is a first one. And then in the chat, there will be some also related to Europe and the rest of the world. So if we embed this societal value, how would we will be still competitive, or how it will be still understood by other competitors coming from Asia or America, for example. So, but let's start with my first question about 6G development with embedded societal value as a driver of the technological process. So I don't know who wants to answer to this, or it could be both Margot and maybe also Chiara, with a different perspective, of course.
Who wants to go first?
I need to read the question well, because I didn't understood it.
So my first question is not written. It's not in the chat. The first one: what change would ensure that 6G development will embed societal value not as a compliance requirement, but as a driver of the technological process?
Okay, sorry, I was.
Maybe I can try to have a go there, which was what I started saying before. So if we take social science as an important input in social science and humanities as an integral part, I think it's already part of the conversation. So I would not say it's my responsibility, but I would say there are conditions in the work program and in the funding of the SNSJU for this to happen. So I would really, really encourage the community to take care about this embedding and embedment of this consideration from the onset. Now, once you make sure that social science is included in the preparatory work, I think there's another, I would say, major step, which is probably, and it has been said throughout the different questions in the chat, also how you design the use case from the onset. So is it iterative sufficiently to have included participatory way inside the definition of the use case that you're going to roll out? And I'm saying this because if we're talking about low TRLs, it's true, but we also have projects with higher TRLs. And if I refer to StreamD projects, and I'm really reading out loud what's in the work program of this year, actually, we're not discussing stakeholder engagement as such, but actually when we say that we should be able to focus on engaging with end users, both these users being the ones in the verticals, so in the vertical business sectors that will use the technology. If you think Industry 4.0, that will be the industry, the warehouses that will be using those technologies. If you think about healthcare or PPDR, that's probably a different type of end users. So I think that's important, and it's clear, it's probably between the lines, but it's clear that that's what we expect also from projects. Now, how this is taken up into the proposal is not my, I cannot judge on this, but this is clearly something that we value as part of the project proposals. And of course, how credibly you involve those stakeholders, how credible you get the input, and how credibly this input is transferred into the design and development phases. Now, I've also got a good news, which is a bit of an announcement, but actually with regards to stakeholder engagements, and I hear the fact of incorporating diverse visions, the SNSJU will be putting out publicly a stakeholders group call for expression of interest, which means that we're also aiming at diversifying the type of stakeholders that can have a view and contribute to the SNS work program priorities. So this will most probably be happening in few days. We are working on it as we speak, and that's also a way for us to broaden the feedback from the different communities. Now, the question which I should ask you is which are the right representatives? Because of course, if we speak about citizens, we have a certain type of representation. If we speak about consumers, we have another one. So probably there's not a good answer, but the question is who should be representing those kind of interests, and is it sufficiently organized to be in a more formal stakeholder group? I think I will stop here for the part on more the multi-stakeholder disciplinary governance, but definitely there are improvements that we welcome through the instruments and tools that we have. And I know all the work that is taking place from KVIs to sustainability in the different working groups. So there's a lot of knowledge there. It has been difficult probably to bring this knowledge together. It's not an easy question. And when I think you say we're here for discussing, there's no final debate. Actually, I think it's a moral start of the conversation that should be brought forward and hopefully in successful manners to guarantee the sustainability of the project's results. I've seen some suggestions in the chat to make it more sustainable, to diffuse this more broadly to the community. So I'll let you maybe comment more on these aspects, which are more project related.
Thank you very much, Chiara, and also for this good news, because I think it's important information that there will be this stakeholder representation, and that will work closely with you with the definition of the work program, the priority, or on the different use cases and the verticals. And you are right, there's been a lot of efforts done of coordination with the task forces to discuss and to share the findings of the different projects in this domain. So that is something that we hope will continue and will move. And we are not at the ending point, even if it's the end of the project, but the work will continue. Margot, if you are, I don't know if one of the team want to say also something about this question. Margot or Carmela, if you want to add also something.
What I can say regarding the question on stakeholder, who shall be the stakeholders? Well,
yeah. It's a difficult question.
No, yes, this I think it cannot be replied by us now here. But we know the work on stakeholder is always contextual to the specific sector and the application. It's a bit easier. It's always complex, but in sectoral applications. So whenever we already have in mind an application and a service, it is much less evident when we are speaking at the level of the infrastructure itself. However, for what concerns the sectoral application, so a very in our chats and interviews with some projects, for example, we found out in certain applications that there were some contestation or fears at the level of some social groups that were impacted negatively by a number of things surrounding this application. We were speaking in terms of agriculture. And I wonder whether these groups, for example, were mapped, because I don't think that all the social groups enter into the radar. So it's very important to keep in mind also those who may be negatively affected or in some way affected. They're not the direct user. So beyond user, stakeholders beyond user, there are other dynamics in society. Another important thing is, and it was said by Maria, I think before, if I'm not wrong, but reasoning at the level of representative and associations is also very important, because we can't just go randomly and take citizens in unless, but still it's not always true. It depends what we are assessing. If we are assessing whether that infrastructure can be set in that particular part of the landscape, we shall go to citizens, individual citizens. So the answer stays with the capacity to read that social context again, in relation to the needs, in relation on how priorities are interpreted and set, and understanding whether beyond the conception of user and final user, there might be other social dynamics that are worth to be read. Again, so it's contextual and you need the specific competencies, I think, to read that society.
Yeah, I mean, you are right, and then it's more a question about this. I mean, if you are referred to this stakeholder group, the representativity of this group on the selection of the representative of the society elements will be very important. It should not be used as a justification for the research, but really represent the citizen and the different stakeholders. Yes, thank you. I don't know. I just want to look back to Eva, because we are So Carmela, you have something you want to add? Something? Yes, please.
Just one point.
Yes, please.
I'm thinking about what we are discussing now, and I think that for sure it is important. We said it in different ways to involve the right people, the right representatives, and so on. But I guess that what is really, really important is also what we ask them. If we, as Lucas, for example, said in his presentation, if we ask just about, for example, the usability of something, that is what happens very often, this is not enough. We need to really understand what people desire. So, and this desirability is not only linked to what they can use, but also to other stuff, including obviously what are the values that they really, and values and fundamental rights, they really want to safeguard in the technology development. Just to underline this and to give other food for thought.
Yeah, so that's food for thought for Chiara. That's for the setting up of the expert group. You might need social science experts as well to help you to define.
So please feel free to apply. It will be an open process. Maybe, Marie-Christine and colleagues, I would just like to comment and maybe to end on my side, at least from on a positive note, because there were some very right comments, also an interesting on are we developing or are we building future networks and technologies on the right technologies, which are also environmental friendly. And maybe on this point, and also in agreement and discussion with what the Commission would have presented, let me just maybe highlight it's always a double sword. The more AI you put, the more network consumption you will have, but it's not said that this should be generative AI based on very large language models. So maybe we can problematize the issue of 6G and future networks also from the fact that if you have, for instance, 6G radio signals that provides built-in environmental sensing, which we were discussing before, which use reflections from buildings, which is called specific technology, which reflect the signals without having to install antennas, or we have different ways. So the technology serves the purpose of environmental sensing. We can have, for instance, continuous monitoring of rainfall, air quality, deforestation, traffic emissions, whatever. And this can also have a positive impact. This is more theoretical, but this can have a positive impact on the need of millions of dedicated sensors and batteries, which also links to the fact that our technology has a purpose also to prolong the lifespan of devices, especially when it comes to IoT. We have some good projects which were also featured into the key achievements, which actually serves the fact of having large-scale monitoring of environmental weather forecasts, for instance, without battery replacements, because that would be IoT battery-less sensors. That could also help. We were mentioning agriculture and farmers. This could help on precision irrigation, fertilizer reductions, wildlife monitoring, and that's also part of, I know, some of the use cases that some of the projects are exploring. And maybe we also mentioned, I think someone in the chat also mentioned that 6G is not just the mobile connectivity, but it's also the connectivity that connects with satellite, with terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks, which enables actually mission critical systems at national scales, and why not at European scales, typically for PPDR. So I know some of you are experts, but this connectivity enables also wildfire forest detection, or very remote area rescue operations, or crowds operations to bring rescues and emergency services closer to where the accidents happened. So I think technology is never neutral, and the use cases that you carve out of technologies are actually building the purpose of the technology itself. Technology in itself does not have a purpose unless it's used differently for different, but I think through the use case, through the definition of the use cases, and I think XIX2 there was mentioned, and it has been instrumental in trying to coalesce the European visions and European views from which family of use cases could be more impactful also from a societal perspective, could also really much help the reflection. And then maybe just to conclude on another positive note, I think, yes, definitely we miss positive narratives on sustainability and others, which are not just based on technology. And I would hope that this can be highlighted as much as possible by the 6G4Society projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will just have a side word, because you mentioned mission critical communication. I think it's also a very positive European narrative, as we know that mission critical communication will not only deal with national communication, but there will be a flagship initiative to develop EU critical communication system in Europe to provide better safety for the citizen and better coordination to face all the catastrophe, disaster and crisis. So that is a very positive narrative on the use of 5G, 6G, and also satellite communication. So that is a good story. Thank you very much. Maybe Eva, I would like to see, because I know that you are watching the time. So we are a bit out of the timing, and I don't know if Monique want to say some closing words.
First of all, thank you very much for all the speakers for indeed this forward-looking perspective. I would like to also give the floor to other panelists, Anna Aseva from Digital for Planet, for the quick wrap-up of this particular panel of discussion. After, the floor is Monique for the final concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva.
Yes, thanks very much, everyone. So wrapping up is always like the hardest part of the panel, and here the panel summarized 2 years of policy work and some work of SNSJU. So just very quickly, we had an approach in this in the policy work of 6G4Society, and this approach is a way of asking the question. Asking the question was the 5G story and societal legitimacy, and how we can learn and do better than 5G story. And so from technical performance, we tried to also go and look at social acceptability, then from acceptability to acceptance, and then from acceptance to desirability. And the method we used to answer the question, so we had different methods, multi-step inclusive methodology, as Carmen and then Margot mentioned. We use desk research and then empirical research, surveys, citizen engagement, stakeholder engagement, including experts, the interviews. We also participated in SNSJU working groups. We both edited and contributed to different white papers on sustainability, on ethical, regulatory, value aspects of media and entertainment and such like working white papers. And also we had feedback from policymakers. And then the project identified risks and gaps that Carmen and Margot presented, and also that Chiara
discussed. And so the two core concerns from this whole policy panel and discussion is that research and innovation governance in practices is the first concern, and the second one is values and rights at risks. And if we take these together, the three values that require stronger and more consistent integration also after the lifespan of the project are privacy, inclusion by design, and EU technology sovereignty. And also, as Chiara mentioned in her keynote, there was this value circle of EU technology sovereignty, from research and innovation to then socioeconomic development. So we basically must embed privacy, inclusion by design, and also the cross-cutting themes such as social desirability, social impact assessment, and overcoming trade-off thinking, also supported by policy actions that Margot mentioned, and new sustainability narratives. And these sustainability narratives must obviously include not only environmental sustainability, which is also mostly focused on energy efficiency, but also societal perspectives and economic perspectives, which also include circularity, as for example, Margot mentioned. And so those those are this is the summary of the panel. Lessons learned. Well, 5 lessons learned. Values might guide design early, not be added later. Governance and funding structures should they strongly shape technological outcomes, and they need to include sustainability values, social impact, social science and humanities as a whole, and now sufficient and meaningful stakeholder representation. Then privacy, sovereignty, and inclusion are systemic challenges, so we need to pay attention to them. They cannot be fixed technically. Trade-off framings, they may somehow limit innovation when we also speak about societal aspects, and the meaningful participation strengthens legitimacy and societal trust. And I think I will stop here. I have more to say, but I think we're running a bit late, so I will just conclude here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. And now the floor is to Monique for the final concluding remarks.
Thank you, Eva. I'm talking to the 33 of you that survive and are still awake. I hope you didn't fall asleep. It was an intense and long afternoon. I really enjoyed. I learned many things, and I think we have been reminded of several points that require some more work. The community is at work on this, as reported by several speakers, by several experts. There are aspects that concern citizens' engagement that are very important. Flavia has been telling us about what are the main concerns and priorities as we have identified them. Of course, you know, the limited sample of answers that we've got is a fact. So, of course, more extensive investigations need to be done. And the news that Chiara just shared with us, it's great, I believe. So clearly we must engage citizens and users in the design, also in early discussions about design of technologies. Then Lucas has helped us going through what we have been working on and shared with the community, that is the social acceptance of technology framework that aims to help technologies with organizing their work and taking into account aspects that relate to social acceptance, that encompass trust, governance, societal impact, and that are not always visible aspects that technologists are used to deal with. And then Katrina went through the chapter of KVIs, key value indicators, and impact mapping. That was a huge work conducted by several people in the consortium in collaboration with many of the other projects in the SNSJU community. Clearly, there is an overall fragmented situation, and this must be overcome in order to make sure that KVIs can effectively serve to drive developments that satisfy specific value targets. Aligned with that, the work that Eleni presented, that is on KVI ontology, is the KVI ontology. And for those who have been working with ontologies and with agent systems or AI agent systems in the past, the point is that when you delegate so much of decisions and autonomy to the network and decisions that are taken somewhere else, you need a common understanding among the decision makers also at digital environment level, that there is a common shared semantic. And having a common shared semantic, especially about 6G and about what are the values in terms of sustainability that we want to assign to 6G is essential. Of course, as also some observation noticed, this is a huge work. We don't have we don't want to be arrogant and think, we've done the work. But what Eleni presented is a solid piece of work that is being discussed also with the standard organizations. There are many other players, industrial players, that are interested in this, and we believe this is the way we need to go. Of course, there are still open questions, how are value demonstrated, and so on and so forth, but these again require a collective approach. Then we had two panels, in my opinion, very interesting: a sustainability panel and a policy panel. So first of all, when it comes to sustainability nowadays, there's so much we hear. There are so many buzzwords. There's so much smoke, if I may. And here, what we pointed out is that we need to be pragmatic, and we need to translate what are high-level aspirational terms into some concrete mechanisms that allow, first of all, to satisfy specific requirements when it comes to societal, environmental, and economic principles and target values. Of course, there are several aspects, and from materials to disposal to production of devices and deployment. Most of the sustainability damage, for instance, in terms of environment, comes from production of devices, network, infrastructure. Therefore, there must be a holistic approach that embraces, also raw materials engineering. And I think here, again, the role of standardization and policymakers is essential, and it has been stressed. So many thanks for those observations. In the policy panel, what we looked more, it's governance challenges, especially because what is very difficult is to identify and prioritize properly the diverse priorities that different actors in the society might have. And also, it's very difficult at design time, or even before the design starts, to understand the social implications that later on the deployment of those technologies that we're trying to design now will have on the society. So that's when it was stressed in this panel that sustainability may require different value systems, not the ones that we are used to, but systems that are referring to circularity, frugality, and other foundational concepts and principles, rather than those, for instance, used in most of the current market paradigms. So only by transforming current business models according to those principles of circularity, frugality, there is a chance to align also on these fronts between what are the needs of the society, of the market, and what can be sustainable development of our economy and society. Thank you. First of all, thanks to all the colleagues, because they put together notes. I read these notes, reading quickly the chats, help of Gen AI to summarize a few points. But I tried to really convey the sense of, first of all, urgency. I would like to convey this sense of urgency. We need to act now. We need to act together. together means embracing a diversity of stakeholders and efforts. We need investments. It's very good that the SNSJU, but also Horizon Europe and other programs are still and will still invest massively on this front. And I think we have to take the opportunity of what this project has done. We started planting seeds, right? And we hope that the plants will grow and they will help really address what are some of the major concerns humanity is called to face. On my side, I would take the opportunity to thank in particular Chiara that has been able to stay with us at the beginning and join us again at the end. We know it's busy times for you, Chiara. Thanks a lot. Thank you all participants. We will share notes. We will share slides, the video, and most of all, we will publish deliverables in which you will find much more than what we could tell you today. And these deliverables will be made available later on the portal. And yes, please continue to provide feedback. We have an online community forum that will leave also after the live of this project. Maybe if someone can share the link. We have social media channels, we have a website. We will make sure that this continues beyond the duration of our project and serve the whole community. So thanks a lot. Thank you, Eva, for the great moderation.
Thank you very much, Monica, and thanks once again for everyone, all the speakers and participants for a very, very active engagement today. We received many questions and comments in the chat indeed. Thank you for that. And as Monica said, the recording and the presentations will be available on the website, all together with other very, very important documentations, deliverables, and other project outputs. So thank you very much for staying until now. We wish you a very pleasant rest of the day.